What if saving someone's life destroyed yours? Daniel Reed learned that lesson the hardest way possible. Handcuffed in front of cameras, his daughter's crayon drawing pressed against his chest, while the woman he'd rescued watched him being dragged away in silence. This is the story of one good deed, one terrible lie, and the moment everything fell apart before the truth could set him free. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The fluorescent lights in the lobby of Vanguard Technologies hummed like distant thunder, cold and relentless. Daniel Reed stood perfectly still, his wrists locked behind his back in steel handcuffs that bit into his skin with every shallow breath. Around him, the morning crowd had frozen mid-step, executives clutching lattes, interns scrolling through phones, security guards whispering into radios. All of them staring. He didn't look at their faces. He couldn't. Instead, he focused on the glass doors ahead, on the gray sky beyond them, on anything that wasn't the sea of judgment closing in from all sides. Daniel Reed, you're under arrest for assault and unlawful conduct, the officer had said moments earlier, her voice flat and procedural, like she'd done this 1,000 times before. Maybe she had, but Daniel hadn't. This was his first time being handcuffed, his first time hearing the metallic click of his freedom disappearing, his first time being accused of something he didn't do. Behind him, someone's phone camera flashed. Then another. The whispers grew louder, spreading like wildfire through the crowd. That's him, the driver. I heard with the CEO? Oh my God, I can't believe... Daniel closed his eyes. The voices blurred together into a single crushing wave of noise. He thought of his daughter, Emma, 7 years old, gap-toothed smile. Her drawing was still folded in his shirt pocket. 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. She'd given it to him that morning at breakfast, her small fingers sticky with maple syrup. That's you, me, and Mama in heaven, she'd said, pointing to each figure. He'd kissed the top of her head and promised her pancakes for dinner. Now he didn't know if he'd ever make it home to keep that promise. Let's go. The officer's grip tightened on his elbow, steering him toward the doors. Daniel's legs moved mechanically, one foot in front of the other, his body on autopilot while his mind screamed in a language he couldn't understand. This wasn't real. This couldn't be real. But the cold metal around his wrists said otherwise. The cameras said otherwise. The faces, so many faces, all of them strangers, all of them convinced they knew exactly who he was, said otherwise. As they reached the glass doors, Daniel caught a reflection in the polished surface. His own face stared back at him, pale and gaunt, eyes ringed with exhaustion. He looked like a man who'd already lost. Behind his reflection, standing near the elevator bank, was Victoria Lane, the CEO of Vanguard Technologies. The woman he'd saved 3 nights ago. The woman who, according to the police, had filed a report against him. She stood perfectly still in her tailored charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression unreadable. Their eyes met for half a second, just long enough for Daniel to see something flicker across her face. Doubt? Regret? Fear? Then she looked away. The doors opened. Cold air rushed in, and Daniel Reed, a single father who'd spent his entire life trying to do the right thing, was led outside into a world that had already decided he was guilty. 3 days earlier, the anniversary gala for Vanguard Technologies was everything Daniel had expected. Too loud, too crowded, and too expensive for anyone who actually worked for a living. Crystal chandeliers dripped from the ceiling of the downtown ballroom like frozen waterfalls. Men in tuxedos clustered around the bar, their laughter sharp and performative. Women in evening gowns glided between them, heels clicking against marble floors. Daniel stood near the back wall in his pressed black suit, hands clasped behind his back, eyes scanning the room with the practiced invisibility of someone who'd spent 15 years as an executive driver. His job tonight wasn't to enjoy the party, it was to be ready. Ready to drive Ms. Lane home when she needed. Ready to open doors, carry bags, wait in silence. Ready to be invisible. He was good at invisible. More champagne? A server appeared at his elbow, tray balanced perfectly on one palm. I'm working. Daniel said quietly. But thank you. The server nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Daniel's eyes tracked back to Victoria Lane, who stood near the center of the room surrounded by board members and investors. She was laughing at something one of them said, but Daniel had driven her long enough to recognize the difference between her real laugh and her performance laugh. This was performance. Her shoulders were tight. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She'd been working 16-hour days for the past month, preparing for the launch of Vanguard's new AI platform. Daniel knew because he'd driven her home every night, watched her collapse into the back seat with her laptop still open, still typing emails at red lights. She's going to burn out, his friend Marcus had said last week over coffee. Marcus worked in the building's mailroom, heard all the gossip. They're saying she hasn't slept more than 4 hours a night in weeks. Daniel had shrugged. Not my business. You care about her, though. I can tell. I care about doing my job. But Marcus was right, in a way Daniel wouldn't admit out loud. He did care. Not in any inappropriate way. He'd never crossed that line, never even thought about crossing it. But he'd spent enough time around Victoria Lane to see past the CEO facade. He'd seen her take calls from her elderly mother at midnight, her voice gentle and patient. He'd seen her cry exactly once, after a board meeting where they'd tried to force her out, her hands shaking so hard she couldn't buckle her own seatbelt. He'd driven her in silence that night, and when they arrived at her apartment, she'd whispered, "Thank you, Daniel." Not for the ride, for the silence, for not asking questions she didn't want to answer. Now, watching her navigate the crowd with that same forced smile, Daniel felt a familiar knot of concern in his chest. She was drinking too much. He could tell from the way she held her glass, the way her gestures had grown looser, less controlled. At 10:47 p.m., she excused herself from a conversation and headed toward the hallway that led to the bathrooms. Daniel straightened, ready to follow at a discreet distance if needed, but she disappeared around the corner before he could move. 10 minutes passed. 15. 20. Daniel frowned. He pulled out his phone, checking for messages. Nothing. He scanned the room again, looking for her dark hair, her distinctive silhouette. She wasn't at the bar, wasn't near the stage, wasn't anywhere he could see. 30 minutes. Something was wrong. Daniel crossed the ballroom, moving quickly but not running, never drawing attention. He slipped into the hallway, checked the women's bathroom entrance. A woman exiting gave him a strange look. "Sorry," he said quickly. "Looking for Ms. Lane, Victoria Lane. Have you seen her?" The woman shook her head and hurried past. Daniel's pulse quickened. He checked his phone again. Still nothing. He called her number. It rang 6 times and went to voicemail. "This is Daniel," he said after the beep. "Just checking in. Let me know if you need anything." He ended the call and stood in the hallway, thinking, where would she go? Not back to the party. She would have passed him. Not outside through the front entrance. Security would have seen her. The parking garage. Daniel pushed through the stairwell door and took the steps 2 at a time, his dress shoes echoing against concrete. The gala was on the 3rd floor. The parking garage started at ground level and descended 4 floors underground. Miss Lane's reserved spot was on sublevel 2. He hit the landing for sublevel 1, kept going. Sublevel 2. The door creaked open into a dim concrete expanse that smelled like oil and exhaust. Overhead lights flickered. Somewhere in the distance, a car alarm chirped twice and went silent. "Ms. Lane?" Daniel's voice bounced off the low ceiling. No answer. He walked quickly between rows of parked cars, his eyes scanning left and right. Most of the spaces were empty. Everyone was still upstairs at the party. His footsteps sounded too loud, too frantic. Then he saw her. Victoria Lane was slumped against the driver's side door of her silver Mercedes. Her evening gown pooled around her like spilled ink, her head tilted at an angle that made Daniel's heart stop. Her purse had fallen open beside her, contents scattered across the oil-stained concrete. One of her shoes was missing. "Ms. Lane!" Daniel ran the last 20 feet and dropped to his knees beside her. "Ms. Lane, can you hear me?" No response. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and rapid. Her skin was clammy, cold to the touch. Daniel's mind raced through possibilities. Too much alcohol, low blood sugar, a medical emergency he wasn't equipped to handle. He pulled out his phone with shaking hands and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? "I need an ambulance," Daniel said, his voice tight and controlled despite the panic clawing at his throat. "I have an unconscious woman in a parking garage. She's breathing, but unresponsive." "What's your location, sir?" He gave the address, the sublevel, the closest cross streets. The dispatcher's voice was calm, methodical, asking questions he answered on autopilot while his other hand checked Victoria's pulse. Weak, but steady. "Ambulance is en route," the dispatcher said. "Estimated arrival in 8 minutes. Is she in any immediate danger?" Daniel looked around. The parking garage was cold, isolated. Cameras in the corners, but no people, no witnesses, no help. "I don't know," he said honestly. "She's cold. I think she's been here a while. Stay with her. Keep her warm if you can. Don't move her unless absolutely necessary." Daniel ended the call and shrugged out of his suit jacket, draping it carefully over Victoria's shoulders. She didn't stir, her head lolled slightly to the side, a strand of dark hair falling across her face. 8 minutes. He could wait 8 minutes, but something felt wrong. The garage was too cold, too exposed. What if whoever had left her here, if someone had left her here, came back? What if she got worse? Daniel made a decision he would replay in his mind 1,000 times over the next 3 days. He couldn't leave her here. Carefully, moving slowly to avoid jostling her, Daniel slid one arm under her knees and the other behind her shoulders. She was lighter than he expected, her body limp and unresisting as he lifted her against his chest. Her head fell against his shoulder, her breath warm against his neck. "It's okay," he whispered, though she couldn't hear him. "You're going to be okay." He carried her toward the stairwell, moving as quickly as he dared. Each step echoed. Each breath felt too loud. His arms burned with the effort of holding her steady, but he didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The stairwell door was heavy. He shouldered it open and started climbing, one step at a time, counting floors in his head. Ground level. First floor, second floor. By the time he reached the third floor, his muscles were screaming. Sweat dripped down his spine despite the cold. But he kept going, kept climbing, until he pushed through the door that led to the ballroom's back service corridor. Voices echoed from somewhere nearby. Servers probably, cleaning up. Daniel turned the opposite direction, heading for a small lounge area he'd seen earlier near the coat check. Private, quiet, warm. He shouldered through another door and found himself in a dimly lit room with 2 leather couches and a coffee table. Perfect. He lowered Victoria onto one of the couches as gently as he could, positioning her on her side in case she got sick. His jacket was still draped over her shoulders. He grabbed a decorative throw blanket from the other couch and added it on top. Then he sat on the floor beside her and waited. His phone buzzed. The 911 dispatcher, checking in. He explained the new location, gave specific directions. The dispatcher confirmed the ambulance would meet him there instead. Victoria's eyes fluttered. A small sound escaped her throat. Not quite a word, not quite a moan. "You're safe," Daniel said quietly. "Help is coming." Her eyes opened halfway, unfocused and glassy. She looked at him without recognition, without comprehension. "Daniel?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here." "What happened?" "You collapsed in the parking garage. Ambulance is on the way." She blinked slowly, processing. "Tired. I know. Just stay awake for me, okay?" She tried to nod, but the effort seemed too much. Her eyes drifted closed again. Daniel checked his watch. The ambulance should arrive any minute. He stood and moved to the door, peering into the corridor. Still empty. He pulled out his phone and sent a quick text to the head of security, explaining the situation in brief clinical terms. Ms. Lane found unconscious in garage. Moved to third floor lounge near coat check. Ambulance incoming. The response came 30 seconds later. "On my way." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Daniel stepped back into the room just as 2 paramedics appeared, their uniforms crisp and professional, a stretcher folded between them. "You called for an ambulance?" the first one asked, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "Yes, she's here." Daniel gestured to the couch. The paramedics moved quickly, efficiently. They checked Victoria's vital signs, asked Daniel questions he answered as best he could. No, he didn't know if she had any medical conditions. No, he didn't know what she'd had to drink. Yes, he was the one who found her. Yes, he'd moved her. He explained about the parking garage, the cold, the isolation. The female paramedic nodded. You did the right thing. She's stable, but we need to get her to a hospital for evaluation. They transferred Victoria to the stretcher with practiced ease. She mumbled something incoherent, her eyes still closed. Daniel stood back, hands in his pockets, suddenly aware of how exhausted he felt. Are you family? The other paramedic asked. No, I'm her driver. We'll need someone to meet us at the hospital. Does she have family we should contact? Daniel thought for a moment. I'll take care of it. The paramedics nodded and wheeled Victoria toward the door. As they passed, her hand slipped out from under the blanket and hung limp over the side of the stretcher. Without thinking, Daniel reached out and tucked it back under the blanket, his fingers brushing against hers for just a second. Then they were gone. Daniel stood alone in the empty room, his suit jacket still on the couch where Victoria had been lying, the decorative blanket crumpled on the floor. He picked up his jacket and checked the pockets. Phone, wallet, keys, everything accounted for. His phone buzzed again. Security, where are you? Third floor lounge. They just took her. Stay there. Daniel sat on the couch and waited. His hands were shaking, delayed adrenaline, probably. He laced his fingers together and stared at the floor, replaying the last hour in his mind. Had he done the right thing? Should he have waited for the ambulance in the garage? Should he have called someone from the party first? Heavy footsteps in the corridor. The door swung open and Malcolm Torres, head of security, stepped inside. He was a big man, ex-military, with a shaved head and a no-nonsense expression that rarely changed. Reed. He crossed the room in 3 strides. What happened? Daniel told him everything. The timeline, the parking garage, the phone call, the decision to move her. Malcolm listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When Daniel finished, there was a long pause. You did good, Malcolm said finally. Could have been a lot worse if you hadn't found her. Daniel nodded, relief washing over him. Someone should go to the hospital. Make sure she's okay. Already handled. Her assistant is on the way. Malcolm pulled out his phone and made a note. I'll need you to write up an incident report. Details, timeline, everything you remember. Of course. And Reed? Malcolm's eyes were sharp. This stays quiet. Understood? Understood. Malcolm clapped him on the shoulder and left. The door swung shut behind him, and Daniel was alone again. He stood slowly, his legs stiff and sore. His watch read 11:52 p.m. The party would be winding down now, guests trickling out in pairs and groups, drunk on champagne and self-importance. No one would know what had happened. No one except the paramedics, security, and Daniel. Invisible, just like always. Daniel collected his jacket and headed for the parking garage to get his car. Tomorrow was Saturday, his day with Emma. They had plans to go to the park, maybe get ice cream if the weather held. Normal life, safe life. He had no way of knowing that in 72 hours, his entire world would collapse. Saturday, 8:43 a.m. Emma Reed sat at the kitchen table with a pink crayon in one hand and a waffle in the other, narrating her drawing with the kind of serious concentration only a 7-year-old could manage. And this is me, she said, adding another stick figure to the paper. And this is you, Daddy, and this is Mama in heaven with the angels. Daniel poured orange juice into her plastic cup, the one with the cartoon unicorns. That's beautiful, sweetie. Do you think Mama can see us from heaven? The question landed like a punch to the chest, the way it always did. Daniel set down the juice carton and moved to the table, crouching beside Emma's chair so their eyes were level. I think, he said carefully, that if there's a heaven, and if Mama is there, she sees you every single day, and she's so proud of you. Emma considered this, her small face serious. Because I'm good at drawing? Because you're good at being you. She smiled, that gap-toothed, syrup-sticky smile that made everything else in the world worth it, and went back to her drawing. Daniel stood and returned to the stove where his own waffle sat cooling and forgotten. 3 years since Sarah died. 3 years of learning how to be both parents at once, how to answer impossible questions, how to keep going when grief tried to pull him under. He was doing okay. Not great, but okay. Emma was happy, healthy, loved. That was what mattered. His phone buzzed on the counter. text from an unknown number. This is Victoria Lane. I wanted to thank you for last night. You may have saved my life. I'm doing well, being released from the hospital this afternoon. I won't forget what you did. Daniel read it twice. A warm feeling spread through his chest. Not pride exactly, but something close. Satisfaction. The knowledge that he'd made the right choice. He typed a reply. Glad you're okay. That's all that matters. Take care. He almost added something else. Some pleasantry about hoping she got some rest, or that he'd see her Monday morning, but decided against it. Short and professional. That was better. Emma appeared at his elbow, holding up the finished drawing. Can you keep this? Of course I can. Forever? Forever. She beamed and skipped back to the table. Daniel carefully folded the drawing and slipped it into his wallet, next to Emma's school photo and the insurance card he hoped he'd never need to use. His phone buzzed again. Another text, this one from Malcolm Torres. Need to see you Monday morning, 9 a.m. My office. Don't be late. Daniel frowned. Malcolm's texts were usually brief, but this felt different, more formal. He typed back, Is everything okay? No response. Daniel stared at the screen for a long moment, unease creeping up his spine like cold fingers. He told himself it was nothing, probably just the incident report, probably just standard procedure, probably nothing to worry about. But the knot in his stomach didn't believe him. Monday, 8:51 a.m. Daniel arrived at Vanguard Technologies 9 minutes early, the way he always did. Early meant prepared. Early meant professional. Early meant invisible. He parked in the employee lot and walked across the plaza toward the glass tower that housed Vanguard's headquarters. The morning was cold and gray, the kind of weather that made his joints ache and his coffee taste bitter. He dropped Emma at school 20 minutes ago, watching her run toward the playground in her bright yellow raincoat, her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. Have a good day, Daddy, she'd called over her shoulder. You too, baby girl. Now, climbing the steps to Vanguard's lobby, Daniel tried to shake off the unease that had been following him since Saturday. Malcolm's text had been cryptic, yes, but that didn't mean anything bad. Maybe they wanted to commend him. Maybe they wanted more details for the insurance report. Maybe he was worrying over nothing. The lobby was already busy with the Monday morning rush. Executives in sharp suits, assistants juggling coffee trays, interns speed walking toward elevators with their heads down. Daniel swiped his ID badge and headed for the security office on the second floor. Malcolm's door was open. Daniel knocked twice and stepped inside. Malcolm sat behind his desk, his expression grave. Beside him stood a woman Daniel didn't recognize, blonde, middle-aged, wearing a police uniform. The knot in Daniel's stomach tightened into a fist. Daniel Reed? The officer asked. Yes. She stepped forward, her hand already moving toward the handcuffs on her belt. Mr. Reed, you're under arrest for assault and unlawful conduct. You have the right to remain silent. The words washed over him like white noise. Daniel's brain couldn't process them, couldn't make them fit into any reality he understood. He looked at Malcolm, searching for some explanation, some indication this was a mistake. Malcolm wouldn't meet his eyes. Wait, Daniel said, his voice hoarse. There's been a mistake. I didn't be... Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law, the officer continued, pulling his arms behind his back. The handcuffs clicked into place, cold and unforgiving. Malcolm, tell them. Tell them what happened. Malcolm finally looked up, and Daniel saw something in his expression he couldn't name. Pity? Regret? I'm sorry, Reed, Malcolm said quietly. I don't have a choice. You have the right to an attorney, the officer said, guiding Daniel toward the door. If you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided for you. Daniel's legs moved, but he wasn't controlling them. His mind was screaming, spinning, trying to understand. Assault? Unlawful conduct. He'd saved Victoria's life. He'd done the right thing, hadn't he? They walked through the corridor down the stairs toward the lobby. With each step, Daniel became more aware of the people around them, turning, staring, whispering. By the time they reached the lobby, a crowd had gathered. Phones appeared, cameras flashed. The whispers grew louder, spreading like poison. And through it all, Daniel stood perfectly still, his wrists locked behind his back, his daughter's drawing folded over his heart, while the world he'd built collapsed around him. Somewhere in the crowd, Victoria Lane stood watching. Daniel's eyes found hers, and she looked away. The police station smelled like old coffee and disinfectant. Daniel sat in a hard plastic chair in a windowless room, his hands finally free of the handcuffs but still trembling. A detective named Ramirez sat across from him, a manila folder open on the metal table between them. "Do you understand why you're here, Mr. Reed?" Ramirez asked. He was younger than Daniel expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a wedding ring that caught the fluorescent light. "No," Daniel said honestly. "I don't understand any of this." Ramirez pulled a photograph from the folder and slid it across the table. Daniel's stomach dropped. It was him, carrying Victoria Lane through the parking garage, her head against his shoulder, her body limp in his arms, her dress riding up past her knees. The angle was wrong, distorted, making it look like something it wasn't, making it look like he was taking her somewhere dark and private instead of carrying her to safety. "This was taken by a security camera on Friday night," Ramirez said, "along with a formal complaint filed by Ms. Victoria Lane alleging assault and unlawful physical contact." The words hit Daniel like physical blows. "That's not what happened." "Then tell me what happened." So Daniel did. He told the detective everything, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his throat. He explained about finding Victoria unconscious, about calling 911, about making the decision to move her to somewhere warmer and safer. He gave times, details, everything he could remember. Ramirez listened without expression, taking notes in a small notebook. When Daniel finished, there was a long silence. "That's quite a story," Ramirez said finally. "It's the truth." "Unfortunately, Mr. Reed, we have Ms. Lane's statement saying otherwise. She claims she has no memory of consenting to be touched or moved. She woke up in an unfamiliar room with her clothing disheveled and you standing over her." "I was waiting for the paramedics. Can anyone corroborate that?" Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. The parking garage had been empty. The lounge had been empty. The only witnesses were the paramedics, and they'd arrived after he'd already moved her. "The 911 call," Daniel said desperately. "I called them. There's a record. We have the call. You reported an unconscious woman. Nothing in that call proves your version of events. Then check the security footage. All of it. It'll show everything." Ramirez made another note. "We'll do that. In the meantime, you're being released on your own recognizance. Don't leave the city. Don't contact Ms. Lane. Don't discuss this case with anyone from Vanguard Technologies." "I need my job. I have a daughter." "That's between you and your employer." Daniel wanted to scream, to flip the table, to make someone understand that this was all wrong. But he'd spent his whole life learning control, learning to swallow anger and frustration and fear. So he nodded and stood on shaking legs. "Am I free to go?" "For now." The hallway outside felt too bright after the dim interrogation room. Daniel walked toward the exit, each step mechanical and unreal. He half expected someone to stop him, to tell him there'd been a mistake, to apologize and send him home. No one did. Outside, the afternoon sun was too cheerful, too indifferent to the fact that Daniel's life was falling apart. He pulled out his phone and saw 17 missed calls. 3 from Emma's school. 5 from numbers he didn't recognize. 9 from his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, who watched Emma after school. His hands shook so badly he almost dropped the phone. He called Mrs. Chen first. "Daniel, thank God," she answered on the first ring. "Emma's fine, she's here with me, but the school called and said there was some kind of emergency." "It's okay," Daniel said, though nothing was okay. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Don't let her see the news." "The news? Daniel, what's going on?" "Please, Mrs. Chen, just keep her away from screens until I get there." He ended the call before she could ask more questions. His car was still at Vanguard, parked in the employee lot where he'd left it that morning. He couldn't go back there. Not yet, maybe not ever. He called a rideshare instead and waited on the corner, watching strangers pass by with their normal problems and normal lives. A woman argued with someone on her phone about dinner plans. A teenager skateboarded past, earbuds in, oblivious. An old man fed pigeons from a paper bag. None of them knew. None of them cared. Daniel was invisible again, but this time it felt like drowning. The car arrived, a blue sedan with a driver who mercifully didn't try to make conversation. Daniel gave Mrs. Chen's address and stared out the window, watching the city blur past. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus in the mailroom. "Dude, what the hell happened? Everyone's talking. Call me." Daniel deleted it without responding. Another text. This one from a number he didn't recognize. "Is it true what they're saying about you and Ms. Lane?" Delete. Another. "You seemed like such a nice guy. Hope you rot." Delete. His hands were shaking again. He turned off his phone and shoved it in his pocket. Mrs. Chen lived in a small house 3 blocks from Daniel's apartment. She was in her 70s, a retired teacher who'd become Emma's unofficial grandmother after Sarah died. When Daniel knocked on her door, she opened it with worry etched deep in the lines of her face. "She doesn't know anything," Mrs. Chen whispered. "She's watching cartoons." "Thank you," Daniel managed. "I can't explain right now, but thank you." Emma appeared in the hallway, her yellow raincoat unzipped, her backpack still on her shoulders. "Daddy, Mrs. Chen said you had to work late, but you're here now." Daniel dropped to his knees and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like apple juice and strawberry shampoo, like innocence, like everything he was trying to protect. "I'm here, baby girl," he whispered. "I'm here." They walked home in the fading light, Emma chattering about her day, something about art class and a boy named Marcus who ate glue. Daniel made the appropriate sounds of surprise and interest, but his mind was elsewhere, trying to figure out what came next. He needed a lawyer. He needed to understand what Victoria had actually said. He needed to figure out how to keep his job, how to pay rent, how to protect Emma from all of this. He needed someone to believe him. That night after Emma was asleep, Daniel sat at his kitchen table with his laptop open and his head in his hands. The news had already spread online. Local news sites were reporting the story with carefully worded headlines that avoided libel while implying guilt. Vanguard Technologies. Executive driver arrested on assault charges. Tech CEO files complaint against employee. After gala incident. Single father accused of inappropriate conduct with unconscious boss. The comment sections were worse. Strangers who'd never met him, never heard his side, had already decided he was guilty. The photograph from the parking garage had leaked somehow, circulating on social media with increasingly vicious commentary. Classic predator behavior. Hope he never sees his daughter again. Rich people always get away with it. Oh wait, he's not rich, LMAO. Daniel closed the laptop before he could read more. His phone sat on the table, still powered off, a small rectangle of glass and metal that suddenly felt like a bomb. He needed to call a lawyer, but every attorney he found online wanted a retainer he couldn't afford. Public defenders were overworked and overwhelmed, and Daniel had no idea how the legal system actually worked beyond what he'd seen in movies. A soft sound from Emma's room made him freeze. He waited, listening. Just her talking in her sleep, probably dreaming about glue-eating Marcus or whatever 7-year-olds dreamed about. Daniel walked to her doorway and watched her sleep, her small body curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit, her face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. She had Sarah's nose, Sarah's stubborn chin. Sometimes when Emma laughed, Daniel heard his dead wife's voice echoing through time. He'd promised Sarah in those final terrible weeks that he'd keep Emma safe, that he'd give her a good life, that he'd be enough for both of them. He was failing. The thought hit him so hard he had to grip the doorframe to stay upright. He'd done everything right, worked hard, stayed out of trouble, raised his daughter with love and patience. And it hadn't mattered. One good deed, one act of basic human decency, and his entire life was collapsing. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Still on, apparently. The screen lit up with another text. "This is Victoria Lane. I need to speak with you. It's important." Daniel stared at the message for a long moment. The detective's words echoed in his head. "Don't contact Ms. Lane. Don't discuss this case." But Victoria had contacted him. That was different, wasn't it? He typed a response with shaking fingers. "I was told not to contact you." 3 dots appeared immediately. She was typing. "I know, but we need to talk. Can you meet me tomorrow? Somewhere private." Why should I trust you? The dots appeared and disappeared several times before her response came through. Because I don't remember what happened that night. And I need to understand. Daniel felt something shift in his chest. Not quite hope, but close. If Victoria didn't remember, then maybe she didn't actually file the complaint. Maybe someone else had done it in her name. Maybe there was still a chance to fix this. Or maybe it was a trap. He typed, "Where?" "There's a coffee shop on Maple Street. The Grindhouse, 2 p.m. tomorrow. Come alone." Daniel hesitated, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. Every instinct screamed that this was a bad idea. Meeting her would violate the detective's orders. It could make everything worse. But it could also make things better. It could give him answers. And right now, answers were the only thing he had left to fight for. "I'll be there." He powered off his phone again and returned to the kitchen table. Sleep felt impossible, but he had to try. Tomorrow was already looming, full of unknowns and dangers he couldn't predict. He checked on Emma one more time, then collapsed on the couch, fully clothed, too exhausted to make it to his own bedroom. His eyes closed, his mind raced, and somewhere between fear and fury, he finally fell into a dreamless sleep. The alarm on his phone woke him at 6:30. Daniel had slept maybe 3 hours, and his body felt like it had been run over by a truck. He dragged himself to the shower, stood under scalding water until his skin turned red, then dressed in his last clean shirt and yesterday's pants. Emma was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with her cereal, swinging her legs and humming a song from some kid's show. She looked up when Daniel entered, and her face split into a smile. "Morning, Daddy." "Morning, sweetie." "Are you taking me to school today?" Daniel's heart clenched. He had no car, no way to get to Vanguard to retrieve it without facing the stares and whispers. And even if he did get it back, he'd been suspended, probably fired, though no one had officially told him yet. "Mrs. Chen is going to take you today," he said, forcing cheerfulness into his voice. "I have some errands to run." Emma's face fell slightly. "But you always take me." "I know, baby, but today's special. Mrs. Chen has a surprise for you." That was a lie. Mrs. Chen had no surprise. But Emma brightened anyway, and Daniel made a mental note to text Mrs. Chen and ask her to pick up some cookies or something on the way to school. At 7:45, Emma kissed him goodbye and skipped out the door with Mrs. Chen, who gave Daniel a long, searching look before leading Emma away. Daniel stood in the doorway until they disappeared around the corner, then closed the door and leaned against it. He had 6 hours until the meeting with Victoria. 6 hours to figure out what to say, how to say it, whether to trust her at all. He made coffee and tried to eat toast, but his stomach rejected everything. Instead, he sat at the kitchen table and forced himself to think like a driver, methodical, careful, always 3 steps ahead. What did he know? Victoria claimed not to remember the night. Someone had filed a complaint in her name. The police had a photograph that looked damning out of context. His job was gone, his reputation was destroyed, and Emma's life would be affected by all of it. What did he need? Proof of his innocence. The security footage, testimony from the paramedics, maybe even Victoria's help, if she was willing to give it. What were the risks? Meeting Victoria violated the detective's orders. If she was setting him up, he could make everything worse. If someone saw them together, it could be used against him in court. But if he didn't meet her, he might never get answers. The hours crawled by. Daniel tried to distract himself with television, but every channel seemed to be running stories about powerful men abusing their positions. He tried to read, but the words blurred together. Finally, at 1:30, he couldn't stand the waiting anymore. He walked to Maple Street. It took him 40 minutes, long enough for his mind to conjure 1,000 different scenarios, each worse than the last. The Grindhouse was a small, independent coffee shop wedged between a dry cleaner and a yoga studio. Daniel had never been inside, but it looked quiet and anonymous, the kind of place where 2 people could talk without being noticed. He arrived at 1:55 and waited outside, watching through the window. The shop was nearly empty. A barista wiped down the counter. 2 college students hunched over laptops. No Victoria. At exactly 2 o'clock, a black town car pulled up to the curb. The back door opened and Victoria Lane stepped out, wearing dark jeans and a nondescript gray sweater instead of her usual designer suits. She looked tired, older somehow, with dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. She saw Daniel and hesitated. her hand still on the car door. For a moment, he thought she might get back in and drive away. Instead, she squared her shoulders and walked toward him. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "I was told not to contact you." "I know. I'm sorry." She glanced at the coffee shop. "Can we talk inside?" Daniel nodded and held the door open. They chose a table in the back corner as far from the other customers as possible. Neither of them ordered anything. The barista gave them a curious look but didn't approach. Victoria folded her hands on the table and stared at them for a long moment. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I don't remember that night. After the party started, everything is just blank. I remember the first hour, maybe two, then nothing. I woke up in the hospital with my assistant telling me I'd been found unconscious." "Did you file a complaint against me?" Daniel asked bluntly. "No." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I didn't. I swear I didn't. When the police came to the hospital, they said a complaint had already been filed. They showed me paperwork with my name on it, but I never signed anything. I never said anything." Daniel felt something loosen in his chest. "Then who did?" "I don't know, but I'm trying to find out." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I have nothing to gain by lying to you here. If I wanted to hurt you, I could just let the legal system do it. But I don't want that. I want the truth." They sat in silence for a moment. The coffee shop's speakers played soft jazz. Outside, a bus rumbled past. "Tell me what happened," Victoria said finally. "From your perspective." So Daniel did. He told her everything, just like he'd told the detective, but this time with more detail. He described finding her in the parking garage, the pallor of her skin, the way her pulse had felt weak and thready under his fingers. He told her about the phone call, the decision to move her, the weight of her body in his arms. Victoria listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When Daniel finished, she was quiet for a long time. "I believe you," she said finally. "Why?" "Because I've known you for 3 years, Daniel. You've driven me home hundreds of times. You've seen me at my worst, exhausted, angry, crying. You've never once crossed a line, never even looked at me the wrong way." She paused. "And because the story you're telling is the one that makes sense. If you wanted to assault me, you wouldn't have called 911. You wouldn't have moved me somewhere public. You would have..." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. "Someone wants me to look guilty," Daniel said. "Someone filed that complaint in your name. Someone took that photograph and made sure the police saw it." "Harold Pierce." Daniel frowned. "Who?" "HR director. He's been with the company for 20 years. I've been trying to force him out for the last 6 months because I found some irregularities in employee complaints, cases that were mishandled, buried, falsified. He's been fighting me at every turn." Victoria leaned forward. "On Saturday, when I was being released from the hospital, he was the one who showed up. Not my assistant, not my family. Him. He said he was there to help, but he kept asking questions about what I remembered, whether I felt unsafe, whether I wanted to file a report. And you said no?" I said I didn't remember enough to file anything. I said I needed time to understand what happened. But 2 hours later, the police showed up saying a formal complaint had been filed. She pulled out her phone and showed Daniel a scanned document. It was the complaint, typed on official Vanguard letterhead, with a signature at the bottom that looked like Victoria's, but slightly off, too smooth, too perfect, like someone had traced it. "He forged this," Daniel said. "I think so, but I can't prove it. Not yet." "Why would he do this? What does he gain?" Victoria's expression hardened. "Leverage. Control. If he can make me look like a victim who needs protection, he can position himself as the hero who steps in to manage the crisis. He can use it to discredit my judgment, to question my leadership. And if the scandal gets big enough, the board might force me out entirely. And I'm just collateral damage." "Yes." She looked away, shame flickering across her face. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I should have stopped this immediately. But I was scared and confused, and by the time I understood what was happening, you'd already been arrested." Daniel wanted to be angry with her. Part of him was. But the larger part recognized that she was a victim too, just in a different way. "What do we do now?" he asked. "We prove what really happened. The security footage from that night should show everything. Me drinking too much, me leaving the party, you finding me, you carrying me to safety. It should show that you were helping, not hurting. The police said they'd review it. They will, but Pierce has access to the security system. If he's smart, he's already edited or deleted anything that contradicts his narrative. So we need to get to it first. Victoria nodded slowly. Malcolm Torres is loyal to the company, but he's not loyal to Pierce. If I can convince him to preserve the footage and turn it over to an independent investigator before Pierce can tamper with it, we might have a chance. That's a lot of ifs. I know. Daniel ran a hand over his face, exhaustion pulling at every muscle. I could lose my daughter over this. If Child Services decides I'm unfit, if they think I'm dangerous, that won't happen. You can't promise that. No, Victoria admitted. But I can promise I'll do everything in my power to make this right. I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll testify on your behalf. I'll go to the media if I have to, whatever it takes. Why? You barely know me. Because you saved my life. And because what's happening to you is my fault, even if I didn't directly cause it. I have resources, power, influence. You don't. So I'm going to use what I have to fix this. Daniel wanted to believe her, but trust was expensive, and he'd already spent too much of it. I need to see something from you first, he said. Some proof that you're actually on my side. What do you need? A statement, in writing, saying you never filed that complaint, that you believe I acted to help you, that you're calling for the charges to be dropped. Give it to the police. Give it to the media. Make it public. Victoria hesitated. If I do that, Pierce will know I'm on to him. He'll destroy evidence, build his own defense. It could make it harder to prove what he did. I don't care about what happens to Pierce, Daniel said, his voice harder than he intended. I care about clearing my name. I care about making sure my daughter doesn't grow up thinking her father is a predator. You're right. Victoria pulled out her phone. I'll draft something now. I'll have my personal attorney review it, then I'll release it tonight. Thank you. They sat in silence for another moment. The barista was watching them now, probably wondering why two people were having such an intense conversation without buying anything. I should go, Daniel said, standing. If someone sees us together... Wait. Victoria reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is 3 months' salary. I know you've been suspended without pay. Daniel stared at the envelope but didn't take it. I can't accept that. Yes, you can. You have a daughter to feed. And this isn't charity. It's the least I can do while we sort this mess out. It looks like hush money. Then don't think of it as coming from me. Think of it as an advance on the settlement you'll eventually get from Vanguard for wrongful termination. Daniel's pride wanted to refuse, but his bank account was nearly empty, and rent was due in 2 weeks. Slowly, he reached out and took the envelope. Thank you, he said quietly. I'll be in touch. Don't call me unless it's an emergency. The police might be monitoring communications, but I'll find ways to update you. She stood and walked toward the door without looking back. Daniel watched her go, the envelope heavy in his hand, hope and suspicion warring in his chest. Outside, the world continued as normal. Cars passed. People walked their dogs. The sun emerged from behind a cloud, casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Daniel tucked the envelope into his jacket and started the long walk home. He made it 3 blocks before he saw the van. It was parked across the street, a nondescript white vehicle with tinted windows. Daniel might not have noticed it at all if the side door hadn't been slightly open, revealing the dark shape of a camera inside. Someone was filming him. Daniel's heart rate spiked. He turned away, walking faster, trying not to look like he was running. But he could feel the camera tracking him, could imagine the headlines already being written. Accused driver meets secretly with victim alleged assailant. Violates no contact order. Single, father, caught in suspicious meeting with CEO. He ducked into a grocery store and moved quickly toward the back, weaving between aisles until he was sure he'd lost sight of the street. His hands were shaking again. His breath came too fast. Someone was watching. Someone knew about the meeting, and they were building a case against him, piece by piece, photograph by photograph. Daniel pulled out his phone and texted Victoria a single word. Followed. Her response came 30 seconds later. I know, I saw them too. Be careful. Daniel waited in the grocery store for 20 minutes, pretending to shop, filling his time by reading cereal boxes and comparing prices on canned soup. When he finally emerged, the van was gone, but the damage was done. Someone now had footage of him meeting with Victoria, violating the detective's explicit orders. It didn't matter that she'd contacted him first. It didn't matter that they were trying to uncover the truth. All that mattered was how it looked. And it looked like guilt. Daniel made it home as the sun was setting, his nerves frayed and his mind racing. He checked his phone and found a text from Mrs. Chen saying Emma was fed and happy and could stay the night if Daniel needed space. He needed space. He needed time to think, to plan, to figure out his next move. He texted back his thanks and collapsed on the couch, the envelope from Victoria still in his jacket pocket. He pulled it out and counted the bills inside. $15,000. Enough to keep them afloat for months if he was careful, or enough to look like a payoff if someone decided to spin it that way. Daniel shoved the money back in the envelope and hid it in the kitchen behind the cereal boxes Emma never touched. Then he pulled out his laptop and searched for the news. Victoria's statement hadn't been released yet, but other stories had appeared, each one worse than the last. Someone had leaked his name to the press. His photograph, not the parking garage shot, but his employee ID photo, was circulating online alongside speculation and rumor. The comments were vicious. Strangers called for his imprisonment, his death, his daughter to be taken away. They shared his address, his phone number, details about Sarah's death that they'd dug up from old obituaries. Daniel closed the laptop before he could read more. His phone buzzed with another unknown number. He powered it off without checking. The apartment felt too small, too quiet, too full of dangers he couldn't see or fight. He thought about Emma, safe at Mrs. Chen's house, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. He thought about Sarah, gone 3 years but still present in every corner of this life they'd built together. He thought about Victoria, taking a risk to meet him, promising to help but maybe just making everything worse. And he thought about Harold Pierce, a man he'd never even met, who apparently hated Victoria enough to destroy an innocent life as collateral damage. Daniel had never been a fighter. He'd spent his whole life avoiding conflict, staying invisible, keeping his head down. But invisibility had failed him. Compliance had failed him. Maybe it was time to fight back. He pulled out his laptop again and started typing, documenting everything he could remember from the past 3 days. Times, dates, conversations, observations. If this went to court, he'd need every detail. If it went to the media, he'd need his own narrative. He worked through the night, stopping only when exhaustion forced his eyes closed. And when he finally slept, he dreamed of Emma's drawing, 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun, and woke with tears on his face and a determination he hadn't felt in years. Whatever came next, he wouldn't face it alone. And he wouldn't go down without a fight. The morning after brought no relief. Daniel woke on the couch with a stiff neck and the bitter taste of fear still coating his tongue. Sunlight streamed through the apartment windows, indifferent to his suffering, and somewhere down the hall a neighbor's television droned the morning news. He reached for his phone out of habit before remembering he'd turned it off. When he powered it on, the screen flooded with notifications. 43 missed calls, 67 text messages, emails stacking up faster than he could count. His hands trembled as he scrolled through them, looking for something, anything that wasn't hate or curiosity or barely disguised schadenfreude. There. A message from Victoria, sent at 3 a.m, statement drafted. Attorney says releasing it could complicate investigation, but I don't care anymore. Going public at noon. Brace yourself. Daniel checked the time. 11:47. 13 minutes until Victoria either saved him or made everything infinitely worse. He didn't know which to hope for anymore. Another text. This one from Marcus. They're saying you're fired. Official termination letter being drafted. I'm so sorry, man. This is bullshit. Daniel set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. Fired. The word felt abstract, divorced from reality. He'd worked for Vanguard for 15 years. Started as a courier, worked his way up to executive driver through sheer reliability and discretion. It was the kind of steady, respectable job Sarah had been so proud of when they'd found out she was pregnant. You're going to be such a good father, she'd said, her hand on her still flat stomach. Our baby is so lucky. The memory hit him like a fist. Daniel stood abruptly, needing movement, needing to do something with the energy crackling through his nervous system. He paced the small living room, then gave up and headed for Emma's room. Her bed was neatly made. Mrs. Chen's work, probably. Stuffed animals arranged just so on the pillow, drawings taped to the walls, a gallery of stick figures and rainbow suns and houses with triangle roofs. Daniel stood in the doorway and tried to imagine explaining this to her, tried to find words that would make sense to a 7-year-old without terrifying her. His phone buzzed. Malcolm Torres. Need to talk. Not official business. Can you meet? Daniel stared at the message. Malcolm had stood silent while the police handcuffed him, had watched him be dragged through the lobby without saying a word. What could he possibly want now? But Malcolm had also said, not official business. That had to mean something. Where? Park on 5th Street. 30 minutes. Come alone. Daniel grabbed his jacket and walked the 8 blocks to the park, watching over his shoulder every few steps for white vans or cameras, or anyone paying too much attention. The park was nearly empty on a Wednesday morning. A few joggers circled the path. An old man fed squirrels from a paper bag. Malcolm sat on a bench near the playground, still in his Vanguard security uniform, but looking somehow smaller than usual. Daniel approached slowly. This better not be a setup. It's not. Malcolm didn't look at him. Sit down. We don't have much time. Daniel sat, leaving space between them, ready to run if this went sideways. You're being railroaded, Malcolm said quietly. Pierce is behind it. I suspected Friday night, but now I'm sure. Victoria told me the same thing yesterday. Malcolm's head snapped around. You met with her? She contacted me, asked me to meet. Someone followed us, probably got pictures. Christ, Reed. Malcolm scrubbed a hand over his face. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Pierce has been bearing complaints and manipulating personnel files for years. Anyone who crosses him either gets fired or destroyed. I've seen it happen 6 times in the last decade. Why haven't you said anything? Because I like my job. Because I have a family to feed. Because going up against Pierce is career suicide. Malcolm finally looked at Daniel, and his expression was haunted. But what he's doing to you is different. You're not some executive playing politics. You're a good guy who helped someone and got crucified for it. I can't stomach it anymore. So help me prove it. I'm trying. That's why I'm here. Malcolm pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and pressed it into Daniel's hand. Security footage from the parking garage and the hallway outside the lounge. Everything from Friday night. I made a copy before Pierce could access the system. Daniel's fingers closed around the small device. This shows what really happened? All of it. You finding her, calling 911, carrying her to safety. The timestamp proves you were trying to help, not hurt. It also shows Pierce entering the security office at 2 a.m. Saturday morning and accessing the footage files. He edited them. Probably. The official copies have been corrupted. Convenient technical malfunction, according to the report. But this is my personal backup. Unaltered. Admissible in court if you can get it to the right people. Why give this to me instead of the police? Malcolm's jaw tightened. Because Pierce has connections in the department. The detective assigned to your case, Ramirez, his brother-in-law works in Vanguard's legal department. It's not exactly corruption, but it's close enough that I don't trust the normal channels. Daniel felt dizzy. The conspiracy was deeper than he'd imagined, tentacles reaching into places he hadn't even considered. What do I do with this? Find a lawyer. A real one. Not a public defender, someone who specializes in employment law and corporate malfeasance. Show them this footage. Let them handle getting it into evidence. I can't afford. Victoria's covering your legal fees. She set up an account this morning. Didn't she tell you? Daniel shook his head. Victoria had given him cash but hadn't mentioned lawyers. Check your email. Her attorney sent the details. Malcolm stood glancing around the park nervously. I need to go before someone notices I'm gone. But Reed, be careful. Pierce is smart and he's ruthless. He'll come after anyone who helps you. He's already destroyed my life. What else can he take? Your daughter. Malcolm's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Pierce knows people in child services. If he wants to make your life hell, he can manufacture complaints, trigger investigations, make it look like you're an unfit parent. I've seen him threaten it before. The world tilted sideways. Daniel gripped the bench to stay upright. He wouldn't. He would. So be smart. Don't give him ammunition, and whatever you do, don't confront him directly. Let the lawyers handle it. Malcolm walked away without another word, disappearing between the trees. Daniel sat frozen on the bench, the thumb drive burning in his palm like a live coal. Evidence, proof. The thing that could save him or paint an even bigger target on his back. His phone buzzed. Noon. Victoria's statement would be going live right now. Daniel pulled up the news on his phone and watched the story unfold in real time. Breaking. Vanguard CEO claims complaint. Filed without her consent. Victoria Lane releases statement. Supporting accused employee. Tech executive says driver saved my life, calls for charges to be dropped. The statement itself was carefully worded but unambiguous. Victoria described waking in the hospital with no memory of the night. She explained that she had never authorized a police complaint, never signed any documents, and believed someone had acted without her knowledge or consent. She praised Daniel's actions as heroic and called the accusations against him completely unfounded. The comments section exploded instantly. Half the readers praised Victoria for standing up for the truth. The other half accused her of being manipulated, traumatized, or covering up something worse. Conspiracy theories sprouted like weeds. Stockholm Syndrome. She's protecting him because she's scared. Rich people always protect each other. This is what happens when women recant. The system fails them. Daniel's stomach churned. Victoria had done exactly what he'd asked, had put her own reputation on the line to defend him, and it was making things worse. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Reed. A woman's voice, professional and crisp. This is Jennifer Lawson. I'm an attorney with Crawford and Associates. Ms. Lane has retained our services on your behalf. I'd like to meet with you this afternoon to discuss your case. I can't afford. All fees are covered. Can you come to our office at 2 p.m.? Daniel's head spun. Yes. Where? She gave him an address downtown. Daniel wrote it on his palm with a pen he found in his jacket pocket. Bring any documentation you have, Jennifer continued. Police reports, witness statements, anything related to your employment. We'll need to move quickly. I have security footage. A pause. What kind of security footage? From the night it happened. Unedited. It shows everything. Don't tell anyone else about that. Don't email it. Don't upload it anywhere. Bring it directly to the office. Do you understand? Yes. Good. See you at 2. The line went dead. Daniel sat on the park bench, staring at his phone, trying to process the speed at which his life was moving. 24 hours ago, he'd been alone and helpless. Now he had evidence, a lawyer, and Victoria publicly vouching for his character. It should have felt like progress. Instead, it felt like standing on a frozen lake, hearing the ice crack beneath his feet, waiting for the moment it would give way completely. He walked home slowly, taking back streets and cutting through alleys, constantly checking for surveillance. The white van from yesterday haunted his peripheral vision, appearing in every light-colored vehicle he passed. Back at the apartment, he retrieved the envelope of cash from its hiding place and counted out enough for a month's rent plus groceries. The rest he tucked into a book on his shelf, something called Advanced Automotive Repair that no one would ever open. Then he showered, shaved, and put on his one good suit, the same one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral. The thought made him pause, halfway through knotting his tie. Sarah would know what to do. She'd always been the brave one, the fighter. When Emma was born 6 weeks premature and the doctors weren't sure she'd make it, Sarah had refused to leave the NICU, had slept in a chair next to the incubator, talking to their tiny daughter for hours, telling her stories about the life they'd have together. Emma had survived. Sarah hadn't, at least not long enough to see their daughter start kindergarten. Daniel finished the tie and studied himself in the mirror. He looked tired. Old. Nothing like the confident driver who'd started work at Vanguard 15 years ago. But he was still standing. That had to count for something. At 1:30, he called Mrs. Chen. Daniel, thank goodness. I've been watching the news. Is Emma okay? She's fine. She's drawing pictures. She doesn't know anything. Can you keep her one more night? Of course, but Daniel, what's happening? These accusations, this mess with your boss. I'm handling it. I have a lawyer now. Good one. It's all going to get sorted out. Mrs. Chen's silence spoke volumes. She didn't believe him. Daniel didn't blame her. Just keep her safe, he said. Please. And don't let her watch television. I won't. But Daniel, that little girl loves you more than anything in this world. Don't you forget that. I won't. He ended the call before his voice could break. Then he tucked the thumb drive into his pocket, grabbed his jacket, and headed for the bus stop. Crawford and Associates occupied the 14th floor of a glass tower downtown, the kind of building Daniel usually only entered to drop off executives. The lobby was all marble and chrome, with a security desk that made him show 2 forms of ID before issuing a visitor badge. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, reflecting Daniel's anxious face back at him from every angle. The 14th floor receptionist barely looked up when he gave his name. Ms. Lawson is expecting you. Conference room B. Conference room B had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Jennifer Lawson stood when Daniel entered, extending a hand. She was younger than her phone voice suggested, maybe 40, with sharp eyes and a handshake that meant business. Mr. Reed, thank you for coming. She gestured to a chair. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? I'm fine. Then let's get started. I've reviewed the police report and the complaint filed in Ms. Lane's name. I've also spoken with Ms. Lane directly about the events of that night. Jennifer opened a laptop and turned it so Daniel could see the screen. Tell me about this security footage. Daniel pulled out the thumb drive. Malcolm Torres, head of security at Vanguard, gave this to me this morning. He says it's unedited footage from the parking garage and hallway, shows everything that happened Friday night. Jennifer took the drive carefully, holding it like something precious and dangerous. Malcolm Torres gave this to you directly? Yes. Did anyone else see him do it? No. We met at a park. He said the official footage was corrupted, but he'd made a backup. Jennifer plugged the drive into her laptop and opened the files. Daniel watched her face as she reviewed the footage, fast-forwarding through empty hallways and parking spaces until she found the relevant sections. There he was, frozen in digital reproduction, finding Victoria slumped against her car. The timestamp in the corner read 11:14 p.m. Jennifer watched him check her pulse, pull out his phone, make the call. She watched him wait, then make the decision to move her. Watched him carry her through the stairwell, his face tight with effort and concern. The second file showed the hallway outside the lounge. Daniel entering with Victoria in his arms. The door closing. 3 minutes passing. The paramedics arriving. Daniel stepping back, hands in his pockets, deliberately keeping distance. Nothing in the footage suggested malice or impropriety. Everything suggested exactly what Daniel had claimed from the beginning, a man trying to help someone in distress. Jennifer closed the laptop slowly. This is good. Very good. It corroborates your entire account. So the charges will be dropped? Not immediately. The prosecution will argue about chain of custody, claim the footage could have been doctored. But combined with Ms. Lane's statement and testimony from the paramedics, this builds a strong defense. The question is whether we go on offense or wait for the prosecution to make their next move. What do you mean, offense? Jennifer leaned back in her chair. Ms. Lane believes Harold Pierce orchestrated this entire situation. If that's true, we don't just defend against the criminal charges. We go after Pierce and Vanguard for wrongful termination, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress. We make them pay for what they've done to you. The idea sent a thrill through Daniel's chest, sharp and unfamiliar. Justice. Real justice. Not just clearing his name, but holding people accountable. What are the risks? He asked. Discovery goes both ways. They'll dig into your entire life. Every parking ticket, every argument, every questionable decision you've ever made. They'll try to paint you as unreliable, untrustworthy. They'll go after your fitness as a parent. Malcolm's warning echoed in Daniel's mind. Pierce knows people in child services. They're going to do that anyway, Daniel said. At least this way I'm fighting back. Jennifer nodded slowly. Then we need to move fast. I'll file a motion to dismiss the criminal charges based on this evidence and Ms. Lane's statement. Simultaneously, we'll prepare a civil suit against Pierce and Vanguard. But I need you to understand something, Mr. Reed. This is going to get ugly. Pierce will retaliate. The media will dig deeper. Your life will be under a microscope for months, maybe years. I understand.
Do you? Because once we start this, there's no backing out. We're all in or we're nothing.
Daniel thought of Emma drawing pictures at Mrs. Chen's house, oblivious to the battle being waged around her. He thought of Sarah, who'd never backed down from a fight in her life. He thought of the stick figure drawing in his wallet, 3 people holding hands under a smiling sun. "I'm in," he said. Jennifer smiled, and it was the smile of a predator who'd just spotted prey. "Good. Then let's destroy Harold Pierce." They spent the next 2 hours going through every detail Daniel could remember. Jennifer took notes in a leather portfolio, asking questions that seemed tangential but always circled back to building a timeline, establishing patterns, creating a narrative that would hold up in court. "Tell me about your relationship with Ms. Lane before that night," Jennifer said. "Any personal conversations? Anything that could be misconstrued as inappropriate?" "No. We barely spoke except about work. Where to pick her up, what time, whether she needed to make stops." "Did you ever express romantic interest?" "Never." "Did she?" "No." "Did other employees ever comment on your relationship?" Daniel frowned, thinking. "Marcus, he works in the mailroom. He said once that I seemed to care about her, but I care about doing my job right. That's all it was." Jennifer made a note. "We'll need to interview Marcus. Anyone else who can testify to your professional conduct. The other drivers, the night security team, maybe some of the executives I drove regularly. Make a list, names, contact information if you have it. We'll reach out." By 4 p.m., Daniel's head was pounding and his throat was dry from talking. Jennifer finally closed her portfolio and stood. "That's enough for today. I'll start drafting motions tonight. In the meantime, I need you to stay off social media, don't talk to the press, and absolutely do not contact Harold Pierce or anyone else at Vanguard except through me." "What about Victoria?" "She's represented by separate counsel to avoid conflict of interest. Any communication between you two needs to go through the attorneys." Daniel nodded. The isolation felt suffocating, but he understood the logic. "One more thing," Jennifer said as Daniel moved toward the door. "Your daughter. Does she have any other family? Anyone who could take her if things get complicated?" The question hit Daniel like a punch. "My sister lives in Oregon. Emma barely knows her." "I'm not saying it'll come to that, but Pierce is going to try to use your daughter against you. The more prepared you are, the better we can counter it." Daniel left the office feeling simultaneously empowered and terrified. The bus ride home took forever, every stop adding minutes to his anxiety. When he finally reached his apartment building, he saw something that made his blood freeze. A woman in a business suit stood outside his door, talking to his neighbor across the hall. She held a clipboard and had the unmistakable bearing of someone official. Child Protective Services. Daniel's first instinct was to run. His second was to call Jennifer. His third, the one he actually followed, was to approach calmly and professionally, even though his heart was hammering against his ribs. "Can I help you?" he asked. The woman turned. She was 50-ish, with tired eyes and a bureaucratic smile. "Are you Daniel Reed?" "Yes." "I'm Angela Martinez with Child Protective Services. We've received a complaint regarding the welfare of a minor at this address. I need to ask you some questions." The neighbor across the hall, Mrs. Morrison, a bitter woman who'd complained about Emma's noise levels since they'd moved in, watched with undisguised interest. "What kind of complaint?" Daniel asked, keeping his voice level. "Anonymous tip suggesting that a child is living in an unsafe environment with a parent who may pose a risk. I need to conduct a home inspection and interview both you and the child." Pierce. It had to be Pierce, moving faster than Jennifer had anticipated, weaponizing the system against him. "My daughter isn't here right now. She's staying with a neighbor." "I'll need that neighbor's name and address." Daniel's mind raced. If he gave up Mrs. Chen's information, they'd go there, question Emma, possibly scare her. But if he refused to cooperate, it would look like he had something to hide. "I'd like to call my attorney first," he said. Angela's expression hardened slightly. "You're certainly entitled to legal representation, Mr. Reed. but understand that refusing to cooperate with a welfare check can be grounds for emergency custody pending investigation. The threat was clear. Talk now or lose Emma immediately. Daniel pulled out his phone with shaking hands and called Jennifer. She answered on the first ring. CPS is at my door, Daniel said without preamble. They want to inspect my home and question Emma. Put me on speaker. Daniel did. Angela listened as Jennifer identified herself and asked for the case number and the nature of the complaint. I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of an active investigation with third parties, Angela said. But I can tell you that we take all complaints seriously, especially those involving potential harm to children. My client has been falsely accused of a crime and is being targeted by individuals seeking to damage his reputation, Jennifer said, her voice sharp. Any complaint filed against him is almost certainly retaliatory and without merit. I strongly suggest you verify the source and motivation before proceeding. We verify all our cases, counselor, but until we complete our investigation, I need access to the home and the child. Jennifer was silent for a moment. Daniel could almost hear her calculating angles, weighing options. My client will cooperate with the home inspection, Jennifer said finally, but the child interview will be scheduled for tomorrow morning with counsel present. Is that acceptable? Angela considered. As long as I can confirm the child is safe and properly cared for tonight. Where is she currently? Daniel gave Mrs. Chen's address. Angela wrote it down. I'll visit there after I inspect your apartment, Angela said to Daniel. And Mr. Reed? I hope for your daughter's sake that these accusations are unfounded, but I've been doing this job for 20 years. I've heard every excuse, every justification, so don't waste my time with lies. She walked past him into the apartment without waiting for permission. Daniel followed, phone still pressed to his ear, Jennifer's voice a lifeline. Stay calm, Jennifer murmured. Answer her questions honestly. Don't volunteer information. I'm recording this call in case we need it later. Angela moved through the apartment methodically, opening cabinets, checking the refrigerator, examining Emma's bedroom. She made notes on her clipboard, her face revealing nothing. The home appears clean and adequately maintained, she said finally. No obvious safety hazards. Does the child have her own bed? Yes, Daniel said, pointing to Emma's room. Does she attend school regularly? Every day. Perfect attendance last semester. Any behavioral problems, academic concerns? No, her teacher says she's doing great. Angela made more notes. I'll need to speak with the teacher as well. And Emma's pediatrician. Do you have those contact details? Daniel provided them, his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. This was Pierce's doing. This violation, this intrusion, this threat to tear his daughter away. Angela finished her inspection and turned to face Daniel. I'm satisfied that there's no immediate danger to the child, but I will be speaking with her tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Your attorney can be present. Until then, she can remain with Mrs. Chen or return home with you. Your choice. She'll stay with Mrs. Chen tonight, Daniel said. I don't want her seeing any of this. Smart decision. Angela headed for the door, then paused. Mr. Reed, I don't know what's really going on with you and these accusations, but I do know that children need stability. Whatever you're fighting about with your employer, however justified you think you are, remember that your daughter pays the price for your choices. Don't let pride destroy her life. She left without waiting for a response. Daniel stood in the middle of his apartment, surrounded by the evidence of his life. Emma's drawings on the walls, Sarah's photo on the mantel, bills stacked on the kitchen counter. Daniel? Jennifer's voice came through the phone. Are you okay? No, he said honestly. I'm not okay. Pierce just weaponized child services against me. We expected this. You said we'd have time to prepare. I was wrong. He's moving faster than I anticipated. But we can handle this. Tomorrow's interview will be fine. Emma will tell them she's happy and safe. The investigator will close the case, and we'll use this as evidence of Pierce's harassment in our lawsuit. And if it doesn't go that way, if they decide I'm unfit, then we fight it, every step of the way. I won't let them take your daughter, Daniel. I promise you that. Promises. Everyone kept making promises they might not be able to keep. Victoria promised to clear his name. Malcolm promised evidence. Jennifer promised justice. But promises didn't protect Emma. Promises didn't stop Pierce from tightening the noose. "I need to see my daughter," Daniel said. "No, not tonight. Let Mrs. Chen keep her comfortable and unaware. Tomorrow morning you can explain everything in terms she'll understand, and then the three of us will meet with CPS together, okay?" Daniel wanted to argue, wanted to run to Mrs. Chen's house and hold Emma tight and never let go. But Jennifer was right. Showing up frantic and desperate would only scare Emma and give CPS more ammunition. "Okay," he whispered. After Jennifer hung up, Daniel sat on the couch in the gathering darkness and tried not to think about how quickly everything was falling apart. The security footage was supposed to save him. Victoria's statement was supposed to change the narrative. The lawyer was supposed to fix everything. Instead, Pierce had escalated, moved the battle onto new ground, gone after the one thing Daniel couldn't defend without looking defensive. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed invisible. Now you lose everything." HP Harold Pierce, finally showing his hand, finally admitting what everyone had suspected. Daniel stared at the message for a long moment, then took a screenshot and forwarded it to Jennifer. Evidence. One more piece of proof that this was personal, targeted, malicious. But evidence didn't ease the tightness in his chest or the fear crawling up his spine. Evidence didn't protect Emma from the people who wanted to use her as leverage. Daniel stood and walked to Emma's room. Her stuffed animals stared at him with button eyes. Her drawings rustled in the breeze from the heating vent. The room smelled like her, strawberry shampoo and crayons and something indefinably sweet. He sat on her bed and pulled out his wallet, extracting the folded drawings she'd given him. 3 stick figures holding hands. Him, Emma, and Sarah in heaven. "I'm trying, baby," he whispered to Sarah's memory. "I'm trying so hard to be enough for her, but I don't know if I can win this fight." The room offered no answers, no guidance, just silence and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. Daniel folded the drawing carefully and returned it to his wallet. Then he lay down on Emma's too small bed and closed his eyes, breathing in her scent, holding tight to the only thing that still felt real. Tomorrow, he'd face CPS. Tomorrow, he'd fight for his daughter. Tomorrow, he'd figure out how to survive Harold Pierce's war. But tonight, he just needed to remember why any of it mattered at all. Morning came too quickly. Daniel woke in Emma's bed with his neck twisted at an awkward angle and his phone buzzing insistently on the nightstand. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. "We have a problem," she said before he could speak. "Victoria's been suspended from Vanguard. The board called an emergency meeting last night and voted to place her on administrative leave pending an internal investigation into her judgment and conduct." Daniel sat up, his brain struggling to process this new development. What does that mean for us? It means Pierce is making his move. With Victoria sidelined, he can control the narrative at Vanguard. He's probably already positioning himself to take over as interim CEO. Can he do that? If the board believes Victoria's behavior compromised the company, yes. And he's got ammunition now. Her public statement supporting you, the secret meeting you two had, the money she gave you. He's spinning it as a CEO having an inappropriate relationship with an employee, using company resources to cover it up. Daniel's stomach turned. That's not what happened. I know that. But Pierce is good at making truth irrelevant. Look, we need to focus on the CPS interview this morning. That's the immediate threat. Everything else we'll handle after. Are you ready? No? Good. Honesty. I'll meet you at Mrs. Chen's house at 8:30. We'll prep Emma together, keep it simple and age appropriate. She just needs to tell the truth about how you take care of her. Daniel ended the call and forced himself through the morning routine. Shower, shave, coffee, he couldn't taste. He dressed in casual clothes, jeans, and a sweater because Jennifer had said formal attire might seem like he was trying too hard. Everything was a calculation now. Every choice a potential weapon. At 8:15, he walked to Mrs. Chen's house. The morning was cold and gray, matching his mood. "Mrs. Chen answered the door before he could knock, her face creased with worry. "She doesn't know anything is wrong," Mrs. Chen whispered. "I told her you had to work late, but you'd see her this morning. Thank you for everything." Emma appeared behind Mrs. Chen, still in her pajamas, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a baby. When she saw Daniel, her face lit up. "Daddy!" She ran to him and he caught her, lifting her up despite the protest in his back. She wrapped her arms around his neck and squeezed tight. "I missed you," she said into his shoulder. "I missed you too, baby girl." Mrs. Chen made pancakes, the kind with the chocolate chips you said were only for special occasions. That sounds perfect. Jennifer arrived 10 minutes later, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of calm professionalism that Daniel envied. She introduced herself to Emma as Daddy's friend who helps with grown-up stuff, which seemed to satisfy Emma's curiosity. They sat in Mrs. Chen's living room, Emma between Daniel and Jennifer on the floral couch. Mrs. Chen hovered nearby, pretending to tidy the already tidy room. "Emma," Jennifer said gently, "in a little while, a lady named Angela is going to come here and ask you some questions about living with your daddy. It's nothing scary, okay? She just wants to make sure you're happy and safe." Emma's forehead wrinkled. "Am I in trouble?" "No, sweetheart," Daniel said quickly. "You're not in trouble at all. Sometimes grown-ups have to check on kids to make sure everything is okay. It's Angela's job." "Like when the dentist checks my teeth?" "Exactly like that." Emma seemed satisfied with this explanation. Jennifer continued, her voice calm and steady. "Angela might ask you questions like what you have for breakfast or where you sleep or what you do for fun. Just tell her the truth, okay? There are no wrong answers." "What if I don't know the answer?" "Then you say, 'I don't know.'" That's a perfectly good answer. They practiced for 20 minutes, Jennifer asking gentle questions and Emma answering with the straightforward honesty of a 7-year-old. Yes, Daddy makes her breakfast every morning. Yes, she has her own bed with her stuffed animals. Yes, Daddy helps her with homework and reads her stories and takes her to the park. At 9 a.m. exactly, Angela Martinez arrived. She greeted Emma with a warm smile that seemed genuine, and Emma, who'd never met a stranger she didn't immediately befriend, smiled back. "Hi, Emma. I'm Angela. I love your rabbit. What's his name?" "Mr. Floppity." "That's a great name. Can Mr. Floppity and I ask you some questions?" Emma looked at Daniel for permission. He nodded, trying to keep the fear off his face. They moved to Mrs. Chen's dining room. Angela, Emma, and Mr. Floppity on one side of the table, Daniel and Jennifer on the other. Mrs. Chen stayed in the kitchen, close enough to hear but giving them space. Angela pulled out a notepad covered in stickers. "These are magic question stickers," she told Emma. "Every time I ask you a question, we'll put a sticker on the page. Want to help me pick the first one?" Emma chose a unicorn sticker, delighted by the game. Angela placed it carefully on the notepad. "Okay, first question. Do you go to school?" "Yes, I'm in 2nd grade. My teacher is Miss Rodriguez, and she's really nice." Unicorn sticker placed. "What's your favorite thing to do at school?" "Art. I like drawing pictures." Star sticker. "What do you draw?" "Lots of things. My family, mostly. Me and Daddy and Mama in heaven." Angela's expression flickered with something Daniel couldn't read. She placed a heart sticker. "Tell me about living with your daddy. What's a normal day like?" Emma launched into a detailed description of their routine. Breakfast at the kitchen table, Daddy walking her to school, or Mrs. Chen picking her up, homework after school, dinner together, story time before bed. She talked about their weekend trips to the park, about making cookies on rainy days, about how Daddy always braided her hair even though he wasn't very good at it. "Does your daddy ever get angry?" Angela asked casually, placing a butterfly sticker. Emma thought about this seriously. "Sometimes when I don't clean my room, but he doesn't yell. He just uses his disappointed voice, and that's worse." Daniel saw Jennifer suppress a smile. "Does he ever hurt you when he's angry?" "No, Daddy says hands are for helping, not hurting. That's a good rule." "Does your daddy have friends who come over?" "Mrs. Chen and sometimes Mr. Marcus from Daddy's work brings us cookies." More questions, more stickers. Did Emma feel safe at home? Yes. Did she have enough food? Yes, except Daddy said they couldn't have ice cream every single night, which was unfair, but she understood. Did Daddy take her to the doctor when she was sick? Yes, and the doctor had a fish tank in the waiting room. The interview lasted 45 minutes. By the end, Emma's sticker page was completely covered and she was getting restless, swinging her legs under the table. Angela closed her notepad. Thank you, Emma. You were very helpful. Want to pick one more sticker for being so good? Emma chose a rainbow and carefully placed it in the center of the page. Then Angela asked if she could talk to the grown-ups alone for a minute. Emma skipped off to the kitchen where Mrs. Chen had promised another pancake. Angela turned to Daniel, her expression neutral. Your daughter is well-adjusted, healthy, and clearly loves you very much. She shows no signs of abuse, neglect, or distress. Based on this interview and my home inspection yesterday, I see no reason to pursue this case further. The relief was so intense Daniel had to grip the edge of the table. So that's it? Case closed? I'll file my report recommending no further action. However, I should inform you that the complaint alleged specific concerns about your criminal charges and fitness to parent. If those charges result in a conviction, CPS may revisit this case. My client will not be convicted of anything, Jennifer said firmly. The charges are baseless and will be dismissed. Angela stood, gathering her things. I hope that's true, Mr. Reed. Your daughter deserves a stable home. Don't let whatever's happening in your life jeopardize that. After Angela left, Daniel pulled Emma onto his lap and held her tight, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo. She wiggled after a moment, uncomfortable with the intensity of his grip. Daddy, you're squishing me. Sorry, baby. I just love you so much. I love you too. Can we go home now? I want to show you my new drawing. They walked home together, Emma chattering about the sticker game and how she'd told Angela all about their cookie-making adventures. Daniel listened and responded automatically, while his mind raced ahead to the next battle, the next crisis, the next move in Pierce's campaign to destroy him. When they reached the apartment, Emma ran to her room to get her drawing. Daniel's phone buzzed with a text from Jennifer. CPS crisis averted. Now we focus on the criminal case. Motion to dismiss filing today. Expect response from prosecution within 48 hours. Before Daniel could respond, his phone rang. Malcolm Torres. Reed, you need to see this. Turn on channel 7. Daniel grabbed the remote and switched on the television. The local news was mid-story, showing footage of Vanguard Technologies headquarters. The chyron at the bottom read, Tech CEO suspended amid scandal. The reporter, a polished woman in a red suit, spoke directly to the camera. Sources inside Vanguard Technologies confirm that CEO Victoria Lane has been placed on administrative leave following allegations of improper conduct with an employee. The decision comes days after Lane publicly defended Daniel Reed, a driver arrested on assault charges. Harold Pierce, Vanguard's longtime HR director, will serve as interim CEO while the board conducts its investigation. The screen cut to footage of Pierce standing at a podium, looking somber and professional. This is a difficult time for Vanguard, he said, but our priority must be the safety and integrity of our workplace. We take all allegations seriously, and we're committed to a thorough, transparent investigation. Lies. Every word was a carefully crafted lie. The reporter continued. Reed's attorney has filed a motion to dismiss the criminal charges, citing new evidence. But questions remain about the relationship between Lane and Reed, and whether the CEO abused her position to protect an employee accused of assault. Daniel's hands were shaking. They were being framed, both him and Victoria, as conspirators in some sordid affair. Pierce had flipped the entire narrative, turning Daniel from victim to predator and Victoria from hero to enabler. Emma appeared in the doorway, holding her drawing. Daddy, why is your boss lady on TV? Daniel muted the television. Just some boring work stuff, sweetie. Show me what you drew. The drawing was another family portrait, stick figures holding hands under a sun. But this time there were 4 figures instead of 3. Daniel recognized himself and Emma immediately. The third was labeled Mama in Emma's careful printing. The fourth, slightly taller than the others, had dark hair and wore what might have been a dress. Who's this? Daniel asked, pointing to the 4th figure. The lady who helped you, Mrs. Chen told me about her when we watched the news yesterday. Emma looked up at Daniel with innocent eyes. She said your boss lady is your friend and friends help each other, so I drew her in our family because she's helping us. Daniel's throat closed. He pulled Emma close, this time gently, and kissed the top of her head. That's a beautiful drawing, baby girl. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number he didn't recognize, but the message made his blood freeze. Press conference at Vanguard, 2 p.m. today. Pierce is going public with evidence against you and Victoria. We need to respond. Meet me at my office at noon. Jennifer Daniel checked his watch. 11:15. He had 45 minutes to figure out childcare and get downtown. Emma, how would you like to spend the afternoon at Mrs. Chen's? I bet she'd love to see your new drawing. Can I bring my art supplies? Absolutely. 20 minutes later, Emma was settled at Mrs. Chen's kitchen table with enough crayons and paper to keep her occupied for hours. Mrs. Chen pulled Daniel aside in the hallway. I saw the news, she said quietly. This is getting worse, isn't it? Yes. That poor woman, your boss, they're destroying her too. I know. Mrs. Chen gripped his arm, her fingers surprisingly strong. You listen to me, Daniel Reed. I've known you since Emma was born. I watched you care for your wife when she was dying. I watched you raise that little girl alone with more love and patience than most people have in a marriage. You're a good man, and good men don't always win, but they don't stop fighting either. Daniel blinked back unexpected tears. I'm trying. I know you are. Now go. Fight. Win. Come back to your daughter. The bus ride downtown felt surreal. Daniel sat surrounded by people going about their normal lives. A teenager with headphones, an old woman with shopping bags, a businessman scrolling through his phone. None of them knew they were sitting next to a man whose entire existence was unraveling. Jennifer's office was controlled chaos when he arrived. Two associates he hadn't met before were reviewing documents at the conference table. Jennifer stood at the window, phone pressed to her ear, her free hand gesturing emphatically. I don't care what he claims to have, she was saying. Half of it is probably fabricated and the other half is taken out of context. We'll be ready. She ended the call and turned to Daniel. Okay, here's the situation. Pierce is holding a press conference at 2 to present what he's calling conclusive evidence that you and Victoria conspired to cover up an assault. We don't know exactly what he has, but sources say it includes doctored security footage, financial records showing the money Victoria gave you, and testimony from Vanguard employees about your alleged relationship. None of that is real. The money was to help with legal fees. The relationship is professional. The security footage shows me helping her, not hurting her. I know, but Pierce is counting on the court of public opinion, not actual court. If he can make you both look guilty enough, it won't matter what the evidence actually shows. The damage will be done. One of the associates, a young man with sharp features, looked up from his laptop. We could hold our own press conference, get ahead of the narrative. Jennifer shook her head. Too risky. We don't have time to prepare properly, and Daniel isn't a public speaker. One wrong word, one moment of emotion, and we hand Pierce exactly what he wants. So we just let him lie? Daniel demanded. No, we respond strategically. I'll release a statement immediately after his press conference, refuting every claim point by point. Then tomorrow, we hold a properly prepared press conference with you, Victoria, and Malcolm Torres all present. We present the unedited security footage. We show the forged complaint. We expose Pierce's pattern of misconduct. Victoria's suspended. Will she even be allowed to participate? She's not charged with anything. She's free to speak. And frankly, the board suspending her plays in our favor. It shows Pierce's influence, his ability to manipulate the system. Daniel paced the conference room, his mind racing. What about the employees Pierce claims will testify? What if they actually believe his lies? The other associate, a woman in her 30s with red-framed glasses, spoke up. We're already reaching out to potential witnesses. Some people are scared of Pierce, but others are tired of his tactics. Marcus from your mailroom? He's willing to testify that you never displayed inappropriate interest in Ms. Lane. 2 other drivers have similar accounts. Pierce will discredit them, say they're just protecting their own. Probably, Jennifer agreed, but we're building a preponderance of evidence. The security footage is the cornerstone, but we need the human element too. We need people who know you, who've worked with you, who can speak to your character. Daniel thought of all the people he'd driven over the years, the executives who'd ignored him, the assistants who'd barely acknowledged his existence. He'd been invisible for so long. Would anyone actually remember him clearly enough to defend him? There's someone else, Daniel said slowly. The paramedics who responded that night. They saw me with Victoria. They saw how I'd positioned her, how I kept my distance. They'd know I was trying to help. Jennifer snapped her fingers. Yes, good. We'll track them down. She turned to the male associate. James, pull the 911 records, get the ambulance company, find those paramedics. James nodded and left the room, phone already to his ear. The television in the corner was tuned to channel 7, volume low. At 1:45, the news cut to a live shot of Vanguard's headquarters. A podium had been set up outside the main entrance, microphones clustered like hungry animals. Reporters jostled for position. Jennifer unmuted the sound. At precisely 2 p.m., Harold Pierce emerged from the building. He was smaller than Daniel had imagined, maybe 5'10", with silver hair and the kind of smooth, unremarkable face that you'd forget 5 minutes after meeting him. He wore a navy suit, an expression of grave concern. Thank you all for coming, Pierce began, his voice measured and somber. Today I'm here to address serious allegations that have impacted our company and, more importantly, the safety of our employees. He pulled out a folder and opened it with theatrical precision. 5 days ago, our CEO, Victoria Lane, attended a company event where she consumed alcohol and became incapacitated. Daniel Reed, who served as her driver, found her in this vulnerable state. What happened next is deeply troubling. Pierce held up a photograph. The parking garage shot, grainy and damning. This image taken from our security system shows Mr. Reed carrying Ms. Lane through our facility. He did not call for medical help immediately. He did not alert security. Instead, he took her to a private room where he was alone with her for several minutes before paramedics arrived. Daniel's jaw clenched. Pierce was technically telling the truth, but stripping away all context, all explanation. In the days following this incident, Pierce continued, Ms. Lane made the unusual decision to defend Mr. Reed publicly, despite having no clear memory of the night's events. We've since discovered that Ms. Lane transferred $15,000 to Mr. Reed, a payment that she has characterized as legal support, but which raises obvious questions about impropriety and hush money. The reporters were scribbling furiously. Camera shutters clicked like insects. Furthermore, Pierce said, we have testimony from multiple employees that Mr. Reed and Ms. Lane had developed an inappropriate personal relationship that went beyond professional boundaries. This relationship created a conflict of interest and may have compromised Ms. Lane's judgment. He paused for effect, his expression hardening. The board of Vanguard Technologies takes these matters extremely seriously. We have suspended Ms. Lane pending investigation. We have terminated Mr. Reed's employment, and we are cooperating fully with law enforcement to ensure justice is served. A reporter shouted a question. Are you saying Miss Lane and Mr. Reed were having an affair? Pierce held up a hand. I'm saying there was an inappropriate relationship that clouded judgment and created a dangerous situation. The exact nature of that relationship is still under investigation. Another reporter. What about Mr. Reed's claim that he was trying to help Ms. Lane? If that were true, why didn't he call security immediately? Why take her to a private room? Why accept $15,000 afterward? These are questions that demand answers. The press conference continued for another 20 minutes, Pierce fielding questions with practiced ease, always implying just enough to seem credible without making any claim that could be definitively disproven. It was a masterclass in character assassination. When it finally ended, Jennifer muted the television and turned to her team. Okay, we respond now. I want the statement ready in 15 minutes. Daniel, I need you to review it before we release it. The next hour blurred together. Jennifer drafted and redrafted, showing Daniel each version, incorporating his feedback. The final statement was 3 paragraphs, clear, forceful, and backed by the promise of evidence. The allegations made by Harold Pierce today are false and defamatory. Mr. Reed acted as a good Samaritan when he found Miss Lane unconscious and in medical distress. Security footage, which Mr. Pierce conveniently omitted from his press conference, shows that Mr. Reed immediately called 911 and moved Ms. Lane to a safer location while waiting for paramedics. The payment Ms. Lane made was for legal representation, not hush money, and was necessitated by Mr. Pierce's campaign of harassment and false accusations. We will be presenting complete unedited evidence at a press conference tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mr. Pierce's version of events will be exposed for what it is. a calculated lie designed to cover up his own misconduct. Jennifer sent it to every news outlet simultaneously. Within minutes, the story had evolved from driver and CEO in scandal to competing claims and Vanguard controversy. But Daniel knew the damage was already done. Most people would remember Pierce's smooth delivery and dramatic revelations. Fewer would read the response buried in follow-up articles. "We need Victoria," Daniel said. "If she stands with me tomorrow, if she tells her side in person, people will listen." "I'll reach out to her attorney," Jennifer said. "But Daniel, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that she won't do it. She's already lost her position at Vanguard. Standing with you could mean losing everything else. Her reputation, her career, any chance of redemption in the industry. She promised to make this right. People break promises when the cost gets too high." Daniel's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "This is Victoria. I saw the press conference. I'm in. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. We do this together." Daniel showed the text to Jennifer, feeling something shift in his chest. Not quite hope. Hope felt too dangerous, but something adjacent to it. Determination, maybe. The knowledge that he wasn't fighting alone. "Okay," Jennifer said, reading the text. "Tomorrow we go to war. Tonight we prepare. I need you to go home, get some rest, and meet me here at 7 a.m. We'll run through every possible question, every angle of attack. You need to be perfect." "I'm not perfect. No one is. But tomorrow, in front of those cameras, you need to look like you are. No hesitation, no doubt. Just the truth, delivered with absolute conviction." Daniel left the office as evening shadows stretched across the city. The bus ride home felt different this time. Less like fleeing and more like regrouping. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Chen's, made her dinner, helped her with her homework. They played a game with her stuffed animals, read 3 stories instead of the usual 2, and when Emma finally fell asleep clutching Mr. Floppity, Daniel sat beside her bed and watched her breathe. Tomorrow he'd stand in front of cameras and reporters. Tomorrow he'd defend his name, his character, his very existence. Tomorrow Victoria would either save them both or they'd go down together. But tonight, watching his daughter sleep, Daniel allowed himself to believe that truth might actually matter. That doing the right thing might, eventually, be enough. He stayed in Emma's room until midnight, then forced himself to his own bed. Sleep came fitfully, filled with dreams of courtrooms and cameras and Pierce's smooth voice reciting lies. When his alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., Daniel woke feeling like he'd been fighting all night. Because he had been. And the real fight hadn't even started yet. The morning arrived with merciless clarity. Daniel stood in the shower, letting scalding water pound against his shoulders, trying to wash away the exhaustion and fear that had settled into his bones. Today would determine everything. Today the truth would either set him free or bury him completely. He dressed in his best suit, the one he'd worn to Sarah's funeral, and later to job interviews and parent-teacher conferences. Emma was still asleep when he kissed her forehead and whispered that Mrs. Chen would take her to school. She mumbled something about pancakes without waking, and Daniel allowed himself one moment of pure love for this small person who trusted him completely, who had no idea her entire world hung in the balance. Jennifer's office was already buzzing with activity when Daniel arrived at 7. 2 television screens showed competing morning news coverage, one declaring Vanguard scandal deepens, while the other asked, "Who's telling the truth?" Victoria sat in the conference room, looking thinner than Daniel remembered, dark circles under her eyes that makeup couldn't quite hide. Malcolm Torres stood by the window, arms crossed, looking like a man who'd made a decision he couldn't take back. "Good, we're all here," Jennifer said, setting down her coffee. "We have 3 hours to make sure everyone is ready. This press conference will be recorded, dissected, and weaponized by Pierce's team. Every word matters, every expression matters. Are we clear?" They all nodded. Jennifer pulled up a presentation on the screen. "Here's the strategy. I'll open with a brief statement establishing the facts. Then Malcolm presents the unedited security footage and explains the timeline. Victoria speaks next, detailing Pierce's pattern of manipulation and her belief in Daniel's innocence. Daniel, you close by speaking directly to the camera about what happened that night and what this has cost you." "What about questions from reporters?" Victoria asked, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "We'll take 5 questions maximum. I'll select them carefully. Anything hostile or designed to create sound bites, We shut down immediately. They spent the next hour rehearsing. Jennifer peppered them with hostile questions, forcing them to stay calm under pressure. Malcolm practiced his presentation on the security footage, walking through each clip with technical precision. Victoria refined her statement, striking the balance between defending herself and supporting Daniel. Daniel's part was simpler, but somehow harder. Tell the truth. Explain what happened. Don't let emotion override clarity. Every time he practiced, Jennifer found something to correct. His tone was too defensive or too passive, or he was giving them ammunition by showing anger. You have to be perfect, she said for the 10th time. Not because you are perfect, but because that's what it takes to overcome lies. At 9:30, they moved to the press conference location, a hotel ballroom Jennifer had rented to avoid giving Pierce home field advantage at Vanguard. Chairs were arranged in rows. A podium stood at the front with microphones clustered like flowers. Camera crews were already setting up, their equipment transforming the ordinary space into an arena. Daniel stood backstage, watching reporters file in. He recognized faces from television, journalists who'd been covering the story since his arrest. They looked bored and cynical, checking phones while waiting for the show to begin. To them, this was just another scandal. To Daniel, it was everything. Victoria appeared at his elbow. Nervous? Terrified. Good. That means you understand the stakes. She paused, then added quietly, I'm sorry, Daniel, for all of this. You saved my life, and I repaid you by letting mine fall apart so badly that it destroyed yours. Pierce destroyed my life. Not you. I should have been stronger, should have fought back immediately instead of letting doubt and fear control me. You're fighting now. That's what matters. She smiled sadly. My career is over regardless of what happens today. The board made that clear. Even if we prove Pierce fabricated everything, I'm too compromised to lead Vanguard. Too much scandal, too much distraction. I'll resign after this is finished. I'm sorry. Don't be. I've spent 20 years building a company and somehow forgot to build a life. Maybe this is the universe telling me it's time to remember what actually matters. She glanced at her watch. 5 minutes. Jennifer gathered them in a circle backstage. Remember, we're not just defending against accusations. We're exposing a pattern of corruption and abuse of power. Pierce has been manipulating people for decades. Today, that ends. Are we ready? Malcolm nodded grimly. Victoria straightened her shoulders. Daniel took a deep breath and thought of Emma, drawing her pictures and trusting him to come home. Ready, he said. The ballroom fell quiet as Jennifer approached the podium. Camera shutters clicked like locusts. She gripped the edges of the podium and looked directly into the cameras. Thank you all for coming. My name is Jennifer Lawson, and I represent Daniel Reed in the matter of false charges brought against him following events at Vanguard Technologies on November 15th. I also represent Victoria Lane in related civil matters. What you heard yesterday from Harold Pierce was a carefully constructed fiction designed to conceal his own misconduct and destroy the reputations of two innocent people. Today, we're going to show you the truth. She stepped aside. Malcolm moved to the podium, his bearing military straight, his voice carrying the authority of someone who dealt in facts, not spin. I'm Malcolm Torres, head of security at Vanguard Technologies for 12 years. On the night of November 15th, I received a call from Daniel Reed at 11:14 p.m. He reported finding Miss Lane unconscious in the parking garage. I have the phone records here. He held up a document, then clicked a remote. The screen behind him lit up with security footage, the timestamp clearly visible in the corner. This is unedited footage from our parking garage at 11:12 p.m. Watch carefully. The ballroom watched Daniel's digital ghost discover Victoria slumped against her car. They watched him check her pulse, pull out his phone, make the call. The audio was silent, but the sequence was clear. A man finding someone in distress and immediately seeking help. Notice, Malcolm said, his voice cutting through the silence, that Mr. Reed's first action is to call 911, not to move her, not to take advantage of her condition. He calls for emergency services. The footage continued, Daniel waiting, pacing, checking Victoria's pulse again, then making the decision to move her. At this point, Malcolm explained, Mr. Reed makes a judgment call. The parking garage is isolated and cold. Ms. Lane has been unconscious for an unknown period. Rather than wait in those conditions, he moves her to a warmer, more secure location on the third floor while waiting for paramedics. The screen switched to hallway footage showing Daniel carrying Victoria, his face tight with effort and concern. They watched him enter the lounge, watched the door close. 3 minutes and 17 seconds later, the paramedics arrived. "This is the footage Harold Pierce omitted from his press conference," Malcolm said. "This is the context he deliberately withheld. Mr. Reed acted as any decent person would. He helped someone in need." Malcolm clicked to another file. "Now I want to show you something else. This is footage from our security office at 2:17 a.m. on Saturday, November 16th, hours after the incident, in the middle of the night when no one should have been in the office." The screen showed a dimly lit room filled with monitors. A figure entered, face partially obscured by shadows but clearly identifiable from his build and walk. Harold Pierce sat at the main console and began typing. This is Pierce accessing the security footage files. According to system logs, he copied several files to an external drive, then corrupted the originals. When police requested the footage, we could only provide damaged files that were, conveniently, unrecoverable. Malcolm's expression hardened. "I made backup copies because I've learned over the years that evidence has a way of disappearing at Vanguard when it's inconvenient for Harold Pierce. This footage proves he deliberately tampered with evidence to support his false narrative." He stepped away from the podium. The reporters erupted with questions, but Jennifer held up a hand for silence. "Victoria Lane will speak now." Victoria approached the podium with the poise of someone who'd given 1,000 presentations, but Daniel saw the tremor in her hands as she gripped the edges. "Thank you. I'm here today because I owe Daniel Reed more than just gratitude for saving my life. I owe him the truth, which I failed to defend when he needed it most." She paused, gathering strength. "On the night of November 15th, I made poor decisions. I drank too much at a company event. I became incapacitated. I put myself in danger through my own lack of judgment. What happened next is what Daniel has said from the beginning. He found me, helped me, and likely prevented a much worse outcome. I have no memory of those hours, but I have complete faith in what the evidence shows." Victoria's voice grew stronger. "What I remember clearly is what happened afterward. I woke in a hospital confused and frightened. Harold Pierce was there, asking questions, suggesting interpretations of events, encouraging me to file a complaint. I told him I needed time to understand what happened. The next thing I knew, a complaint had been filed in my name, with a forged signature." She held up a document. "This is the complaint. This is my actual signature for comparison. They're not the same. Pierce filed false charges using my name without my knowledge or consent." The reporters were scribbling furiously now. Victoria continued, her anger barely controlled. "Harold Pierce has spent 20 years at Vanguard manipulating personnel files, burying legitimate complaints, and destroying anyone who challenged his authority. I've been trying to remove him for months after discovering irregularities in how he handled employee grievances. He knew I was investigating him. This entire situation was his preemptive strike, destroy my credibility and remove a threat to his position." She looked directly into the cameras. "I am voluntarily resigning from Vanguard Technologies effective immediately. Not because I'm guilty of anything, but because this company has become toxic under Pierce's influence. The board suspended me rather than investigate the real threat. That tells me everything I need to know about where their loyalties lie." Victoria stepped back. Jennifer nodded to Daniel. This was it, his moment to speak or stay silent forever. Daniel approached the podium on legs that felt like water. The lights were too bright, the cameras too numerous. Every reporter watching him with expressions ranging from skepticism to barely concealed hostility. He thought of Emma, of Sarah, of every person who'd ever believed in him when belief wasn't easy. "My name is Daniel Reed," he said, his voice rough but steady. "I'm a single father. I drove executives for a living. I'm not anyone important or special, but I try every day to be a good man, a good father, a decent human being. That's all I've ever tried to be." He gripped the podium. "On November 15th, I found my boss unconscious and alone in a parking garage. I didn't think about my job or how it might look or what people might say. I thought about getting her help. I called 911. I stayed with her. I made sure she was safe. That's what anyone should do." His voice cracked slightly. "The next Monday, I was arrested in front of my colleagues. My name was destroyed in hours. Strangers called me a predator. They threatened my daughter. They said I should rot in prison, or worse. All because I helped someone who needed help." Daniel looked up from his prepared notes, speaking directly to the cameras now, letting them see the exhaustion and pain and stubborn determination that had kept him standing. Harold Pierce took one act of basic human decency and twisted it into something ugly. He forged documents. He manipulated evidence. He filed false charges. And when Victoria tried to defend me, he destroyed her career too. Why? Because I was convenient collateral damage in his war against someone who threatened his power. He paused, emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "I have a 7-year-old daughter who draws pictures of our family. She added Victoria to one of those drawings because a neighbor told her that Victoria was my friend who was helping me. My daughter understands something that got lost in all of this. Friends help each other. Decent people help each other. That's not scandal. That's not conspiracy. That's just being human." Daniel's hands were shaking now, but he didn't care. "I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm asking for truth to matter, for evidence to matter, for justice to be based on facts instead of fiction." Harold Pierce is counting on people being too busy or too cynical to care about what actually happened. Don't let him be right. He stepped back from the podium. The ballroom was silent for 3 heartbeats, then erupted with shouted questions. Jennifer selected a reporter in the front row. "One question. Ms. Lane, are you saying the board knew about Pierce's misconduct and did nothing?" Victoria returned to the podium. "The board received my reports on irregularities in Pierce's department. They chose to characterize my concerns as personal vendetta rather than investigate properly. That's why I'm resigning. I can't work for an organization that protects corruption." Another reporter, this one toward the back. "Mr. Reed, how do you respond to allegations of an inappropriate relationship with Ms. Lane?" "There was no relationship beyond professional. I drove her to meetings and appointments. We barely spoke outside of work logistics. Anyone who says otherwise is lying or has been lied to." A third reporter stood. "Malcolm Torres, aren't you risking your job by being here today?" Malcolm's expression was grim. "Probably, but I've watched Pierce destroy good people for years and done nothing because I was scared. I'm done being scared. Some things are worth losing your job over." Jennifer held up her hand. "2 more questions. What happens now? Will charges be dropped?" Jennifer fielded this one. "We've presented this evidence to the district attorney's office. Given the clear proof of Mr. Reed's innocence and the evidence of evidence tampering, we expect all charges to be dismissed immediately. If they're not, we'll file motions to compel and take this to trial where a jury can see the truth." The final question came from an older journalist with gray hair. "Mr. Reed, if you could say something to Harold Pierce right now, what would it be?" Daniel hadn't expected this. He looked at Jennifer, who nodded slightly. "I tell him that you can destroy a person's reputation, but you can't destroy their character. You can take away their job, but you can't take away their integrity. You can make people believe lies for a while, but truth has a way of surviving." Daniel's voice was quiet, but filled with steel. "I tell him I forgive him for what he did to me, but I'll never forgive him for what he tried to do to my daughter." The press conference ended. Reporters swarmed toward the podium, but security kept them back. Jennifer hustled Daniel, Victoria, and Malcolm out a side door and into a waiting car. No one spoke during the drive back to Jennifer's office. They were all too wrung out, too emotionally depleted. Daniel stared out the window at the city passing by, wondering if it had worked, if they'd done enough. His phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Chen. "Emma saw you on TV at school. She's very proud. Says you looked like a superhero. Come get her when you can." Daniel showed the text to Victoria. She smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her in days. "She's right," Victoria said quietly. "You are. I'm just a dad trying to protect his kid. That's what makes you a hero." Back at Jennifer's office, they watched the news coverage roll in. The story was shifting in real time. Headlines evolved from Vanguard scandal to evidence of misconduct by HR director to did Harold Pierce frame innocent driver? Social media was faster and more brutal. The comments section that had called for Daniel's imprisonment now turned their fury toward Pierce. Someone leaked his address. Someone else started a petition demanding his arrest. The mob's attention had found a new target. Daniel felt no satisfaction watching Pierce get destroyed the same way he'd been destroyed. It just felt hollow and sad, like everyone had learned nothing from the whole mess except which person to hate next. At 3 p.m., Jennifer's phone rang. She answered, listened for a long moment, then smiled. The district attorney's office has declined to prosecute. All charges against Daniel Reed are being dropped, effective immediately. They're also opening a criminal investigation into Harold Pierce for filing a false police report, evidence tampering, and fraud. The relief hit Daniel so hard he had to sit down. Charges dropped. It was over. The criminal case, at least, was over. What about Vanguard? Victoria asked. What about the civil suit? That's up to you both, Jennifer said. We have grounds for a massive lawsuit, wrongful termination, defamation, emotional distress. But lawsuits take years and cost a fortune in emotional energy. Sometimes winning means walking away. Daniel thought about it. He thought about Emma, about the life they needed to rebuild, about moving forward instead of staying mired in the past. I don't want their money, he said. I want my name cleared. I want the record to show I'm innocent. Beyond that, I just want to go home. Victoria nodded slowly. I want Pierce prosecuted. I want the board investigated. But I don't want to spend the next 5 years in court battles. I want to find out who I am without Vanguard defining me. Jennifer made notes. I'll draft a settlement proposal. Vanguard issues a public apology, pays a modest settlement to cover legal fees and lost wages, agrees to correct all personnel records. In exchange, you both release them from further civil liability. We focus on making sure Pierce faces criminal consequences. That works, Daniel said. Agreed, Victoria added. Jennifer's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her expression changed. You need to see this. She turned on the television. Breaking news, police had arrested Harold Pierce at Vanguard Technologies headquarters. The footage showed him being led out in handcuffs, his smooth facade finally cracked, his face flushed with rage and fear. The reporter on scene was breathless with excitement. Harold Pierce, the HR director who accused Daniel Reed of assault, has been arrested on charges of filing a false police report, tampering with evidence, and fraud. Sources inside the police department say the evidence presented at this morning's press conference led to an immediate investigation and arrest warrant. Daniel watched Pierce being put into a police car, the same journey Daniel had taken days ago, the same humiliation, the same destruction of reputation in real time. He waited to feel vindicated. Instead, he just felt tired. I need to go get my daughter, Daniel said quietly. Jennifer nodded. Go. Take the weekend. We'll handle the settlement negotiations Monday. You've done enough for now. Victoria stood. Daniel, wait. Can we talk? Just for a minute? They stepped into the hallway. Victoria leaned against the wall, looking more vulnerable than Daniel had ever seen her. I owe you more than an apology, she said. I owe you a debt I can never repay. You saved my life, and I nearly destroyed yours. You didn't destroy it. Pierce did. You fought to make it right. Too late. Too slowly. But you did fight. That matters. Victoria smiled sadly. I'm leaving the city. Starting over somewhere people don't know me as the disgraced CEO. But before I go, I want to make sure you and Emma are taken care of. There's a trust fund. No. Daniel, no more money. No more debts or obligations. You helped me get a good lawyer. You stood up when it mattered. That's enough. More than enough. Then let me do one thing. One last thing. Victoria pulled an envelope from her purse. My personal attorney has connections at several companies. This is a letter of recommendation for any job you want. Executive protection, corporate security, whatever interests you. You don't have to use it, but I wanted you to have options. Daniel took the envelope. Thank you. Take care of that little girl. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her. They shook hands formally, then Victoria pulled him into a brief hug. Be happy, Daniel Reed. You've earned it. Then she walked away, her heels clicking against the polished floor, heading toward whatever came next. Daniel took the bus across town to Emma's school. The afternoon pickup line was in full chaos. Kids streaming out, parents clustering in groups, the organized chaos of a Thursday afternoon. Emma spotted him from across the playground and ran at full speed, her backpack bouncing, her face split wide with joy. "Daddy, you were on TV. Everyone saw. Mrs. Rodriguez said you were very brave." Daniel caught her and lifted her up, not caring that she was probably too old for this, not caring about anything except the solid weight of his daughter in his arms. "Did I do okay?" he asked. "You were perfect. And the lady, Ms. Lane? She was nice. She said nice things about you. She's a good person who had some bad things happen to her." Emma pulled back to look at his face seriously. "Are the bad things over now?" "Yeah, baby, the bad things are over." They walked home hand in hand, Emma chattering about her day. Something about a science project and a boy who brought a lizard for show and tell. Normal things. Beautiful, ordinary, normal things. At home, Daniel made Emma's favorite dinner, spaghetti with the sauce from a jar she insisted tasted better than homemade. They ate at the small kitchen table, Emma smearing sauce on her face while telling him increasingly elaborate stories about the lizard. After dinner, after bath time, after 3 stories instead of 2, Daniel tucked Emma into bed and sat beside her like he had every night for 7 years. "Daddy?" Emma's voice was sleepy. "Are you going to keep being my daddy forever?" The question hit him in the chest. "Of course I am. Why would you ask that?" "Because some kids at school said maybe you would go away. Because of the trouble." Daniel leaned down and kissed her forehead. "Emma, listen to me. I am your daddy forever. Nothing and no one can change that. Not trouble, not bad people, not anything. You're stuck with me. Promise?" "Promise." She smiled and closed her eyes, her hand curled around Mr. Floppity's ear. Within minutes, she was asleep. Daniel stayed beside her bed, watching her breathe, watching the rise and fall of her small chest, watching the miracle of her existence. He thought about all the ways this could have gone differently, all the ways he could have lost her. But he hadn't. They'd survived. Together. His phone buzzed quietly. A text from Jennifer. "Vanguard wants to settle. Public apology, full reinstatement with back pay, or severance package of your choice. Legal fees covered. Personnel record cleared. They're desperate to contain the damage. We can have this wrapped up by Monday." Daniel considered his options. He could go back to Vanguard, reclaim his position, make them pay for what they'd done, or he could take the severance and start fresh somewhere that didn't carry the weight of everything that had happened. He thought about Victoria's letter of recommendation, about options and fresh starts and choosing what came next instead of letting it choose him. He texted back, "Severance. I want a new start." Jennifer's response was immediate. "Good choice. You've earned a fresh beginning." Daniel set down his phone and pulled out his wallet. Emma's drawing was still there, folded and refolded so many times it was starting to tear along the creases. 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. He'd protected this. Protected her. Protected what mattered most. The next morning, Daniel woke to sunlight streaming through his bedroom window and Emma singing off-key in the kitchen. He found her at the table with a bowl of cereal and a fresh drawing in progress. "What are you making?" he asked, pouring coffee. "A new picture. For the wall." This one showed 2 stick figures, just Daniel and Emma. No one in heaven, no one helping. Just the 2 of them holding hands under a sun that took up half the page. "That's beautiful," Daniel said. "It's us," Emma explained, "starting new adventures." "What kind of adventures?" "I don't know yet, but good ones. Because we're together." Daniel sat beside her and helped color the sun bright yellow, then orange, then red for good measure. They used every crayon in the box until the sun blazed with impossible color. Over the weekend, Daniel avoided the news and social media. He took Emma to the park where they fed ducks and climbed on the playground equipment. He took her for ice cream even though it wasn't a special occasion. He read her extra stories and let her stay up past bedtime because they could, because they were free. Because the cloud that had hung over them had finally lifted. On Monday, Jennifer called with the final settlement details. Vanguard would pay 6 months severance, cover all legal fees, issue a public apology, and provide an exemplary letter of recommendation. Harold Pierce had been formally charged with multiple felonies and was facing significant prison time. The board was conducting a full review of HR practices, and several other directors had voluntarily resigned. "You won," Jennifer said, "completely and totally." But Daniel didn't feel like a winner. He felt like a survivor. There was a difference. He used part of the settlement money to take Emma on a weekend trip to the coast. They stayed in a small hotel with a view of the ocean, built sandcastles that the tide washed away, collected shells that Emma insisted had magical properties. They ate fish and chips on the pier and watched the sunset turn the water into liquid gold. "Daddy?" Emma asked as they walked back to the hotel, her hand small and sticky in his. "Are you happy now?" Daniel thought about the question. Was he happy? His career was over, his reputation was damaged, maybe permanently. He'd been through hell and come out scarred, but Emma was safe. The truth had prevailed, and tomorrow held possibilities instead of just fear. "Yeah," he said, squeezing her hand. "Yeah, baby girl. I'm happy now." 2 months later, Daniel started a new job at a private security firm. The work was similar but different, protecting people instead of just driving them, making decisions instead of just following orders. The pay was better, the hours were more flexible, and no one looked at him with suspicion or whispered when he walked past. Victoria sent a postcard from Montana, where she'd bought a small ranch and was learning about horses and quiet mornings and life without quarterly earnings reports. Malcolm had also left Vanguard, taking a position with a nonprofit focused on workplace safety and ethics. Marcus from the mailroom got promoted to a better position after the board shakeup. Pierce was convicted on 4 counts and sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. The judge had been particularly harsh about abuse of power and manipulation of the legal system. Daniel didn't attend the sentencing. He'd moved on. Emma thrived. Her grades stayed excellent. She made new friends. She drew hundreds of pictures showing their new adventures, visits to museums, weekend camping trips, quiet evenings at home. The pictures accumulated on the walls until their apartment looked like a gallery of stick figures and rainbow suns and a child's unbounded optimism. On what would have been Sarah's 40th birthday, Daniel and Emma visited her grave. They brought flowers and drawings and stories about everything that had happened since the last visit. Emma talked to the headstone like Sarah could hear every word. "We had a really hard time, Mama," Emma said, arranging flowers carefully. "But Daddy was so brave. He protected us, just like you would have." Daniel's throat tightened. "Your mama would have fought harder than I did. But you didn't give up. That's what matters." Walking home from the cemetery, Emma slipped her hand into Daniel's and asked the question he'd been both expecting and dreading. "Daddy, if you could go back and not help that lady, if you knew everything that would happen, would you still do it?" Daniel thought about the arrest, the humiliation, the fear. He thought about Pierce's threats and the CPS investigation and all the ways his world had nearly collapsed. He thought about the cost of doing the right thing. Then he thought about Victoria, alive because he'd found her. He thought about Pierce, finally held accountable for years of abuse. He thought about standing in front of cameras and telling the truth, about teaching Emma through action that integrity mattered more than safety. "Yeah," he said finally, "I would. Because some things are more important than protecting yourself. Helping people matters. Truth matters. Being the person you want your daughter to become matters." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer. "That's what I thought you'd say." That night, Emma presented Daniel with a new drawing. This one was different from all the others, more detailed, more carefully colored. It showed 2 figures standing together with the sun rising behind them. Above the sun, in careful printing, Emma had written, "Heroes." "That's us," she explained, "because we're brave and because we help people, and because even when bad things happen, we don't stop being good." Daniel hung the drawing on the refrigerator where he'd see it every morning, where it would remind him that the hardest test of character wasn't avoiding trouble, but surviving it with integrity intact. Months turned into a year. The news cycle moved on to new scandals. Vanguard Technologies recovered under new leadership. Victoria sent occasional emails from Montana, each one sounding more content than the last. Malcolm became a sought-after consultant on workplace ethics. Pierce served his sentence quietly. And Daniel Reed, single father and survivor, simply lived his life. He worked hard at his new job. He attended every one of Emma's school events. He dated occasionally, but nothing serious. His heart still belonged to Sarah's memory and to Emma's future. He made new friends and maintained old ones. He learned that healing wasn't linear, but it was possible. Emma turned 8, then 9, then 10. She grew taller and smarter and more confident. She still drew pictures constantly, but now they included more than stick figures. Detailed scenes of mountains and oceans, portraits of people she knew, abstract designs that showed sophisticated understanding of color and form. One of those pictures won a local art contest. At the award ceremony, Emma gave a short speech about how her daddy had taught her that being brave meant doing the right thing even when it was hard, even when it cost you everything, even when no one was watching. Daniel stood in the back of the auditorium with tears running down his face, proud beyond measure of this small person he'd somehow raised to be kind and strong and true. After the ceremony, as they walked to the car, Emma asked, "Do you think Mama saw me win? I think she sees everything you do, and I think she's incredibly proud. Are you proud?" "So proud I could burst." Emma grinned and skipped ahead, her award certificate clutched in one hand, her future bright and unbounded ahead of her. Daniel followed, thinking about how close they'd come to losing all of this, how one man's cruelty had nearly destroyed everything that mattered, how easy it would have been to give up, to accept defeat, to let the lies win. But they hadn't given up. They'd fought, survived, and come out stronger. Not unchanged, Daniel still had nightmares sometimes, still felt the phantom weight of handcuffs on his wrists, still dealt with anxiety that hadn't existed before. But he'd also learned things about resilience and courage, and the surprising strength that comes from protecting someone you love more than your own safety. The world was still imperfect. Bad things still happened to good people. Justice was uncertain, and truth didn't always prevail. But sometimes, on the best days, in the crucial moments, doing the right thing was actually enough. Daniel unlocked the car and watched Emma climb into her booster seat, already chattering about where they should celebrate her win. "Somewhere with ice cream," she insisted, "with the big sundaes that had too much whipped cream." "Deal," Daniel said, starting the engine. "The biggest sundae they have." As they drove through the city toward their favorite ice cream shop, the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and orange and pink. Emma pressed her face against the window, watching the colors shift and change. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "It really is." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it completely. The world was beautiful. Life was beautiful. The simple act of driving his daughter to get ice cream on a Tuesday evening was beautiful in its ordinary, perfect simplicity. They'd survived the storm. They'd found their way back to clear skies. And whatever came next, whatever challenges or joys or mundane moments filled their days, they'd face it together. That was all that mattered. That was enough. That was everything.